The Star Wars Old Canon Book Club is made possible by contributions on Patreon. Head to patreon.com/SWOCBC for ad-free episodes, reading guides, movie and TV episode audio watch-alongs, and more. Today's Old Canon fact of the day comes from the Star Wars Essential Guide to Characters by Andy Mangels, first published in 1995. C-3PO is a Cybot Galactica 3PO human-cyborg relations droid. He was activated 112 years before his adventures with the Rebel Alliance, and his first job was said to be programming binary load lifters. Today's selection is Star Wars, from the Adventures of Luke Skywalker, a novel by Alan Dean Foster, writing as George Lucas and first published on November 12th, 1976. Enjoy the show, and may the Force be with you, always.
On April 15th, 2014, outside of the movies and TV shows, Disney rebooted the Star Wars universe, wiping out almost 40 years of characters, continuity, and culture. Now, internet microphone talkers Jesse Cox, Michael Davis, and Alex Fasciani step back across the ages to re-experience that other galaxy, frozen in time, far, far away, just like they did back then, from the very beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Star Wars Old Canon Book Club.
Ooh,
yeah,
boom.
That's right. Today we're going to be taking a look at Star Wars, a Luke Skywalker adventure, Star Wars, the novelization by George Lucas, a.k.a. Alan Dean Foster. It was originally released in 1976.
Yeah, November 1976.
Yeah.
Months before the movie came out. And I have so many questions.
Yeah. And
so many.
We're here. We're back.
What's up?
All three of us are here again.
It's exciting to be around the table with you boys.
We haven't seen each other since the last episode, whatever that one was.
Yeah.
Is it weird to think that, during the pandemic, we were doing this show?
Were we?
Were we?
Dude. Yeah. Or at least if we weren't, it was, literally seconds before. Rise of Skywalker came out, what?
Oh, yeah.
In, the end of 2019? And we never did an episode on the last episode of Mandalorian?
That is true. People keep asking me to this day if we're going to cover it.
It was all right.
No.
Yeah. I liked it. It was fun.
Yeah, I think the thing that we determined is that right now, more than ever, we want to archaeological deep dive the roots of Star Wars and where it came from and just spend some time there.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we got a little... Obviously me, but the magic wasn't quite there.
He was goated with the sauce, ladies and gentlemen.
But, and we joked, I feel like we joked about even before doing an Old Canon Book Club, but the idea of going in and looking at it, I mean, it's the same thing we're doing with the new canon, but
it's 50 years ago. Yeah, it's fine.
Let's look back at I'm trying to do David Attenborough or whatever,
very
the
good.
tapestry, brick by brick, assemble, Star Wars canon from the very first thing and look at the weird dead what do you call it, evolutionary dead ends of ideas and concepts, and just see if you were a kid or whatever in the 70s, how did the Star Wars mythos get built on an individual basis?
If you were a kid during the 90s, like myself, who was a 10-year-old obsessed with Star Wars, this is where it all comes from, and this is where you got into Thrawn and all those different things, where you had the books. Honest to God, I for years was how did I as a child know about Emperor Palpatine?
Dude, I think about
as
that
a
all
name,
the time.
having the name Palpatine, because it's not in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
How did I know his name was Palpatine? And what's crazy, through this series, episode 1, I already know.
Yeah.
You got to read the first snippet for people, because you read it. We got coffee and we're then out the schedule for stuff, and he was read the first 2 paragraphs of this novelization. It's the prequels.
It is.
And then you're oh, that's probably how we knew it without seeing it in the movies, is the information, hearsay, Like it got
The
out
craziest-
like old
the craziest thing,
urban legends.
The craziest
basically.
thing too is that it says from the first saga, comma, Journal of the Wills.
Journal of the Wills.
So it's literally like we already know going into this. This basically what happened here was a book came out by Alan Dean Foster called Ice Rigger. And Ice Rigger was like in Alan Dean Foster's like whatever cinematic universe or whatever he has of his books, but it was like a kind of popular sci-fi book at the time. And so George Lucas basically just took him out to lunch and was like, here's the screenplay I've got. Can you like fill out the backstory a little bit and make it feel a little bit more, you know, cushy for a book? And then you're going to write 2 books. You're going to write this book off my screenplay, and then you're going to write a sequel to it just in case we can't do anything else besides write a book. And the original book sold out pretty quick. Like, I don't think it sold out before the movie dropped, I don't think, but it was like...
They were saying in the foreword written by George that it was like, it did fine. It was not a smash hit. It sold well, and then the movie came out, and it was like, couldn't get the book.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know when to bring it up because I have questions about literally just the book itself, and I guess we'll put that down to order of operations here and how
man.
we want to do stuff going forward. But like,
Yeah.
I have genuine author like writing questions about the way things are written in this book, the way things are described. Like, this was fun because I know what it's supposed to be.
Right.
I know what this is, and the differences aren't just things like, you know, I'm sure there's a million different like videos that exist about the differences between the book and but the differences aren't merely just an aesthetic thing or like a different guy was in the room. There's so many ways things are described that I'm like, that is not how I ever saw that being. I'm pretty sure that's not how that looked in the movie.
Yeah, it's all before. I mean, it's before.
Yeah.
And actually, I was wrong. The book sold 500,000 copies by February of 1977. So there was actually months. I don't know how much hype there was leading up to Star Wars.
It's so weird that's a lot, right?
3 months is a lot.
But I'm saying that's a lot of books.
500,000
The way that George Lucas describes it
Well,
before the thing was
yeah.
like, it was like a base hit.
What is it? New York
then-
Times bestseller is 10,000, 100,000, something like that?
Not surprisingly low.
Oh, it's very low,
Surprisingly low number. It's still an insane amount of books to sell, but it's a surprisingly low number. But apparently, in the 3 months after it came out, it sold another 3.5 million copies.
That I believe.
Right. Yeah. It flew off the shelves.
Yeah. I don't know, like back in the 70s, and I just read recently Quentin Tarantino's first book. Did you guys clock that came out over?
You told me that it came out.
Yeah,
but I
he
haven't
wrote
read it.
he wrote like a movie novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it was really interesting because things play out a little differently. Even in this book, there's major things that aren't shown on camera or on the page that just aren't touched on, and the showdown with the Manson people doesn't even happen in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood novelization.
Yeah.
And it goes down these like weird, long, meandering paths with some of the characters, and you get a little bit more weird character work. And he was just underlining the fact, Quentin Tarantino was underlining the fact that there was like a culture of like non-literary sort of like mass market paperbacks that were based off movies and TV shows that would come out, and everybody would buy them in the grocery store because there was no fucking Netflix. There was no
That was like their blockbuster, or like
think about comic books too. Like everybody used to read comic books. In 1991, X-Men #1 became the best-selling comic book ever. In the 90s. That's not that long ago. And it's just the only difference.
a little longer than I like to think, but you're right. In terms of,
I mean,
Geologically.
I was alive.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I was alive. You know what I mean? It wasn't like in the 40s, like some Miss Captain Marvel.
There's a
issue.
20-year-old listening right now like, that doesn't affect me at all.
Yeah, but you don't know, dumb fucking kid. Get the fuck
hey,
out.
like this book, I wasn't alive when this book came
neither
out.
was I.
Yeah, but that's the thing that's so crazy about this is like looking at it through that, and I'm sure some of you I'm sure you read like Jurassic Park: The Lost World.
The last book novelization I ever
Resident
read was
Evil.
episode 3.
Oh,
I read the episode 3 book before episode 3 came out, and I was like, I actually really liked that. I mean, I was
Yeah, you were
senior in high
riding
school.
high off
I
Halo,
was like
Fall of Reach.
I was like
and-
18 or whatever. I was like, and I did not like the other movies or the prequels, but I was like, okay, this is going to be pretty sick.
Yeah.
And then I watched the movie and I was like, you didn't do it. But I'm also realizing a lot of books, your brain does a lot of the work, and there's more time for character interactions to play out.
Sure.
So, but is there, and it sounds like there is there almost like, it would be kind of like fun to go through, not like as a podcast, but as a personal exercise, like reading novelizations and watching and just like thinking about that art of the novelization?
It's also one person's work now, which is
Right.
really, really great. Like as a person who reads a lot of comics, and I know you're on like an MCU podcast, so I'm sure you're getting it from the complete other side a lot of the time, where it's like, I don't even know how to describe this. Like with movies, it's almost like we're talking about now like religious gods, like making decisions about our future lives. Like it's so all encompassing. There's like thousands of people that make each movie. I mean, you see the credits, right? But a comic book version of a superhero story, like the Gore the God
Three
Butcher.
dudes.
Yeah, the Gore the God Butcher like arc that made the movie. Yeah, it's literally just one. It's one thing. It's like a piece of creative work that's so much less filtered, and that I think characterizes the old Star Wars universe. Pretty much like the one big characterization of it that I would say, going back across the timeline shift to the Legends universe, like everything here, this book is just literally here to be a good sci-fi book that can make some money like on its own merit as a story. So this is a dude who's a good sci-fi writer who got hired to write a couple books. And that's all there was at this time. So there's no marketing meetings. There's no, thinking about how it's going to do in other markets. It's just a book that somebody turned in. Nobody read it. You know what I mean?
And that I think is interesting, is that I don't know about the timeline, if there was a trailer released before this book came out, but there's some things, and I very much still would like you to read that intro bit.
Oh, yeah.
But there's stuff in this book that, like, I wrote down a note. And again, it comes down to the way this book is written, in that I don't know if people had a visual image of what any of this stuff was.
No, not at all.
Because oftentimes in the book, like there's one moment where I'm trying to think of what it might. It might have been like a duck or a bird or something.
Oh, like what's a duck?
Yeah, they have to add that stuff in so we can understand what it looks like. But also some of the descriptors, I was like, how do we know exactly? I had to write this down because throughout the book they would describe things in ways that were like very quick and basic. And so I wrote this down because I think everyone understands visually what Darth Vader looks like. Right? We just know what but this is the way Darth Vader's described in this book, and this is the description. This is it.
Yeah.
2 meter tall bipedal, black robes trailing from the figure and face forever masked by a functional yet bizarre black metal breath screen. The Dark Lord of the Sith was an awesome, threatening shape. That's the descriptor. To me, if I had I know what it looks like, so that's fine. But if you were reading this for the first time, I'd be like, what the hell is this? That's why I have to imagine the art and all the different things coming out beforehand helped feed into this. Because a lot of this book is like, Luke goes to meet his friend. Oh, that's his friend Deke.
Yeah.
Deke likes to play with tools. All right, bye, Deke. And you're like, what the? And I guess either I'm used to the way fantasy and sci-fi is written now, where it's like 8 pages of descriptions. But this is, we are moving on. We're getting to the plot.
Pretty sure
Who cares about these people?
Pretty sure R2-D2 can walk in this book.
It's what's great about, or we like make fun of like calf as being too similar.
Yeah.
This is hilarious because I wrote it down before of like all the examples before I finally got the vibe. They reference human concepts and
just go for it,
animals.
yeah.
But then I realized it's not like a story being told in universe. It's like a Princess Bride or something. It's like,
We're being
imagine
told
Alan
it.
Dean Foster is sitting you down and he is walking you through. So some of the descriptions aren't meant to be like, he's talking about like plastic. He's talking about other things that aren't supposed to be what is in the universe, but he's like, campfire story. He's like, an awesome black figure with a screen.
He is reading you the Journal of the Wills. It's what he remembers from that book.
It's like a spoken a recitation of it. It's so interesting because you're like, it takes a second, and anytime he makes a real world reference, it's a little bit jarring. But you just picture that, like, I don't know what Alan Dean Foster looks like, but I imagine he's got like, I have like a Jim Henson vibe, but a little bigger.
You're
there's
probably
like,
right on the money.
There's like a pipe, like a what do you call it? Like what do you
corncob pipe?
Yeah, like a or like what Gandalf or somebody would.
Sure.
I just imagine him leg crossed, and he's like emphatically gesturing with his hand, and that's how I imagine like this story is being like.
He
told
is
to
like
me.
in Reign of Fire.
Yeah.
When they redo Star Wars in that movie for the kids. That's
Hell
what he's doing
yes.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah. He actually, like, if you buy this book even today, like this, I have like the new version in my hand right now. It says
that
by what? Oh, the cover art's tight.
gorgeous.
Yeah. But it also says by George Lucas, and it always has on every version of this book.
Yeah, it was
that's ever come
ghost
out.
written, I guess.
Yeah, but it's literally like people ask him, and he's like, "I'm not mad at all. This is George's idea. I literally just expanded on it a little bit. It would be weird if a contractor had his name on a Frank Lloyd Wright house." That's what he said.
Sure. Yeah.
So like, I get it. Like,
It checks out.
and that's why I feel like he's not going that extra distance to like make so many editorial calls. Like, he definitely fleshes it out. He definitely like adds some words and some texture to things.
Well, and like because the whole angle through which like like books, you're in their head. You can't. I mean, you can do some narration in movies, but you have to sort of explain their thought process because that it would be weird almost with how books are told to not. And
Yeah.
so you get to view things from like a different perspective, and especially the Obi-Wan and like Vader, like some of that stuff is like so much more interesting.
There's a
with
lot
the
of
way that they
differences.
describe it and stuff. It's so cool.
They take time to. It's interesting. They take time to do things that are brushed through in the movie that we really quickly just get a glimpse of, and then the things that are in the movie they kind of like zoom through very quickly. And I think that's, as a companion piece, this flushes out the world a little better. And again, going back to this intro, that straight up is just. Here's what I'll say. Anyone who ever says to you that Star Wars is not political just needs to read the first like 3 pages of this book.
Even A New Hope, the movie politics are like it's about the Senate and like.
But they brush. It's like really quickly. It's like the Senate won't stand for this. It's like there is no Senate. Like okay.
Yeah, in
it's
the book, you know what's happening. You see that it's like in process.
in the book. It literally is like Palpatine is Nixon. Like, that is
Well, and
basically what
and
it
like
is.
in the movie, I guess because all you know is what you see when they're like the Senate has been disbanded and someone's like no, and you're like, well, I don't really know what that means. Like that sounds bad, but here they they contextualize how uncool that is. It's not just like, well, I guess in this universe, Senate's come and go.
There are literal senators in that room in the book.
In the choking scene.
Yeah, so they're like on the like Death Star hanging out as part of it.
Or is it the Death Star? Like, they don't even say the Death Star to the last fucking page of the book almost.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to read the intro to this. First of all, Another Galaxy, Another Time is the like slogan of this podcast because it's like the first draft version of A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. Long time ago. Whoops. Third draft. And
Which is so... Another Galaxy, Another Time is...
it's perfect.
so tight. Like, look, A Long Time Ago, Galaxy Far Away is
It's classic.
famous.
Yeah.
But I also just realized it's just Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many things that, because like, Star Wars has been part of my life since before memory. Like, I grew watching it. There are things that I just accepted that I didn't even think about. And I was like, oh, that is cute. It's like a fable, but it's a space fable instead of whatever.
And what's beautiful about this book is it makes Star Wars less sci-fi and more fantasy.
It's very clear from the book, and I think maybe this is just because we are kids watching this without the context. Like, if I was 30 in the 70s and Star Wars came out, I think I would pick up on the sort of like radio space serial vibe a little harder than I did when I was a kid watching it, because Star Wars was already out when I was a kid and it was already a part of our tapestry of like culture, so everything kind of pointed to Star Wars. But now that I'm older and I've like gone around and gone back in time and seen a lot of that old stuff, and it, the vibe of it kind of contextualizes all the Star Wars movies in a way, except for the more recent ones. But like all the ones that George Lucas did, you can kind of see what he was aiming for a lot more clearly. And honestly, I'm not going to talk about the sequel trilogy too much, but like Rise of Skywalker, as whack as that movie is in a lot of ways, like more than anything, it underlined the fact of how silly this all is in some way, like how crazy all these stories are, and how really like what happened in Rise of Skywalker is kind of like, if you didn't care so much about Star Wars, would be like the exact logical thing that you would expect to happen at the end. If you weren't so invested, it would be like, the bad guy is back somehow, and he's taken, and he's gonna make all the bad guys come, and it's just like it's just
Weird radio.
Yeah,
I don't like the way you said that.
he's gonna fuck them all right in
He's gonna make all the bad guys count.
jazz. That's a great name for some music. No, but I'm gonna read the intro to this.
Blast that jizz.
This is from November of 1976. So that's pretty crazy. I'm going to read this. You just give me a minute to get through this. Another galaxy, another time. The old republic was the republic of legend, greater than distance or time. No need to note where it was or whence it came, only to know that it was the republic. Once, under the wise rule of the Senate and the protection of the Jedi Knights, the republic throve and grew. But as often happens when wealth and power pass beyond the admirable and attain the awesome, then appear those evil ones who have greed to match. So it was with the Republic at its height. Like the greatest of trees, able to withstand any external attack, the Republic rotted from within, though the danger was not visible from the outside. Aided and abetted by restless, power-hungry individuals within the government and the massive organs of commerce, the ambitious Senator Palpatine caused himself to be elected president of the Republic. He promised to reunite the disaffected among the people and to restore the remembered glory of the Republic. Once secure in office, he declared himself emperor, shutting himself away from the populace. Soon, he was controlled by the very assistants and bootlickers he had appointed to high office, and the cries of the people for justice did not reach his ears. Having exterminated through treachery and deception the Jedi Knights, guardians of justice in the galaxy, the imperial governors and bureaucrats prepared to institute a reign of terror among the disheartened worlds of the galaxy. Many used the imperial forces and the name of the increasingly isolated emperor to further their own personal ambitions. But a small number of systems rebelled at these new outrages. Declaring themselves opposed to the new order, they began the great battle to restore the old republic. From the beginning, they were vastly outnumbered by the systems held in thrall by the emperor. In those first dark days, it seemed certain the bright flame of resistance would be extinguished before it could cast the light of new truth across a galaxy of oppressed and beaten peoples. From the first saga, Journal of the Wills, and then there's a quote, "They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Naturally, they became heroes." Leia Organa of Alderaan, Senator.
It's so good.
That is
It even points to the sequel trilogy.
And so I'm like, one of the things that we're doing with this is like, because even with the new canon, the original, we're like, nothing exists. This is the Big Bang of Star Wars. This is the first bit of Star Wars
It's
introduced
all
to
there.
the world ever in history. Is the prequels like that's the first bit of Star Wars information you
It's
ever have.
all there, yeah.
Fascinating.
And the best part is everything, like you were saying, Alex, everything in that branches off into something either 10 years later or 20 years later
Talking
or
about
40
lighting the
years
flame
later.
of the resistance, like
Yeah.
dead
That's
ass.
the like Flame of the Resistance, and I'm like, that can't.
Somebody
be-
read this,
It
for sure.
had to be like a cheeky nod to this.
And actually, can I just say, like, Rogue One, like, becomes like a doubly tight movie after reading this book?
Sure.
Because they literally returned Blue Squadron to the story. Anyway,
Yeah, it's fascinating. And the other thing that's like fun, I don't know if you guys had this approach, but it was even when I would watch A New Hope again, I had already seen the next movies, so I already like take what happens in them and like play it back, and it like recolors or contextualizes A New Hope when I watch it. But because of this, and the way we're doing it, I didn't have that. So like experiencing like Vader, like I already knew who the Emperor was, but when you read this, he's not a powerful Sith. Like all the context clues and stuff they give you in this is that he's literally just a politician that he like was played, and he's irrelevant, and they openly like mock him
Right.
in like Tarkin, Vader, like it's just so interesting to be like, oh, like Tarkin is actually like the military evil leader, and
Right.
Vader is like the mystical, like Emperor to them is some fucking rube sitting in Coruscant.
It's Game of Thrones, yeah.
Yeah, it's so
Dune.
it's so
Yeah.
interesting. And then when you watch, because like now you know that the Emperor is the big bad, but reading it this way, you're like, it's a different story. It's like it started. It was going to be something different. It's so interesting.
At first, I was like, oh, it feels like a retcon. Like over time, George was like, oh, we're going to change to make the Emperor more important. But I would love to believe that if this was book one, and there would be many, many books in this like fake series, if it was, oh yeah, everyone assumes the Emperor is a nobody, but the reason he's away from everyone is because he's playing everyone else. They're all infighting and they're all trying to become the next Tarkin and do whatever. And that does actually, that's kind of
obvious.
As they build the backstory in the movies and the animated shows, that's kind of the vibe. Is he's like, I'm just Palpatine. And he's like, I tricked you, haters.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty neat.
It's low key Dune fan fiction. Like,
yeah.
straight up.
It definitely could be that he always intended that, but just on this book alone,
Desert planet.
it seems,
like, you know,
oh yeah.
like it's just all there. Yeah.
I
Except
think
for
we're
the
gonna
twist of Dune, which I don't
hold
wanna-
on.
no spoils.
We're gonna save Dune talk for the movie because that I think is a much bigger conversation.
Sure.
But like, at least like now we see that he plays the feeble guy. But like,
But in this
before
book,
that,
it's clear he was just a politician.
He was just a
Yeah.
politician, and like the local governors, like, it becomes a much bigger deal, at least to me, that Tarkin wanted this space station. Like, sure, having a big piece of fear to rule the galaxy is important, but when I always thought like, yeah, the Emperor wanted that for himself. But when you look at it as, no, this is Tarkin's.
Tarkin becomes the
big
leader of the
move.
galaxy if he has a Death Star. Yeah.
Well, and Vader, who sort of like poo-pooed it in the movie, poo-poos it a lot more, and you realize, because he's got a whole... He is not... The Emperor isn't his master in this book. He is the fucking top Sith, and they hint that he has his own. He's like, if they could only see the plans he had, I'm like, what are yours?
That's
It's
the
like
other. That's
wild.
The other thing. That's the other thing that's crazy too is they say Sith Lord in this book,
It's in there.
but they don't say that in the movies.
Right. Well,
No.
doesn't Obi-Wan call him a Dark Lord of the Sith? No, I don't
think so.
I'm pretty sure...
I don't think at least until Return of the Jedi.
You're gonna be surprised. They drop a lot of names in the first movie, but look, next episode we'll know.
We'll find out.
Yeah,
but
we will know.
We'll find out. But I don't even think that. But like thinking about the fact that Splinter of the Mind's Eye is like a sequel to this book and not to the movies.
I cannot wait to read.
Like
It's gonna be great.
I know that Vader's in it from the cover. You know what I mean? And I pretty sure I've read the comic book version when I was like 10 years old, so I maybe vaguely have an idea of what it's about. But like the idea that he's going to be the big bad in something and it's not going to be leading to the Emperor is like very novel. It's interesting. Like even like in all the comics and stuff that you read of Vader like now, it's all contextualized in the like under the Emperor, which is kind of interesting.
They do this. I think they did it before Disney took over, but they did a lot in Disney stuff where everybody's endpoint is a foregone conclusion. So they're all just gonna like go. They just like continuously have the Emperor and Vader like brush up against stuff. What's the rebellion save the world? Actually, that sounds like Galaxy Quest.
Saw Gerrera.
Saw Gerrera, like
He butts with the
he's always
Alliance,
like
yeah.
he's like. He doesn't ever get to be more than a like you know where he's going kind of like
He's more
everybody
interesting-
has their role to play and they have to play it. Whereas and even like Thrawn is like always Thrawning. Whereas here characters get to be different, hit an event, and then like does that make sense? Where, like
They can
they're
be
not
changed.
going through the
Yeah. Well,
they're not
motions.
filling
being
a backstory,
puppet.
yeah.
They're like reacting in real time to how they probably would. And then they'll eventually get there.
Yeah, it's more like a soap opera or something where things happen permanently rather than like, you know, like New Coke came out and everybody freaked out because it didn't taste like old
Yeah,
Coke.
right.
I think in general, the big thing with all mainstream media now that's like super corporate like that is that they try and sort of keep it at sort of like a very like consistent state. Like if you notice like when they switched the New Republic's sort of context after Return of the Jedi in the new universe, they kind of made it so that like they're still kind of like scrappy rebels.
Yeah.
You know, no matter like the whole time because you want to have the idea of
Underdog.
like you want to be at Disneyland and not be confused about why there's like guys in like camo and there's guys in Imperial outfits, regardless of what time period you're in Star Wars.
Right.
So, you know, that kind of stuff is interesting to see that they're kind of a lot more free. And I think in general, like just because George Lucas, he was like, don't touch this specific point in time. Don't touch this specific point in time. Other than that, smoke a big bowl of weed and get crazy,
and
baby.
that is most of the books, to be honest.
Yeah.
Going back to what you're saying about plotting out and things like that, based on this book, wonder when it was decided that Luke and Vader were related. Because if Vader's not related to, if you just think about sitting at a writer's table and someone says, oh, Luke is Vader's son, then at that point it's like, oh, Vader can't be the final bad guy. Vader has to be able to be turned back to good by his son, so there needs to be another bad guy. Oh, that's Palpatine, that's the Emperor. But if that's not the case in this book, then it's like, oh.
It really does not seem like it at all. It's pretty clear that Darth Vader is not Luke's father.
He's the stuff about like your crazy sorcerer's ways and religion, all that stuff plays as like hokey in the movie. It's like, oh, we don't believe you. But in this book, it feels like he's got sorcerer's ways and it's like a religion and he is the head honcho Sith of like a cult of Sith. And it feels cool as hell. You're like, oh, it kind of feels like Vader would show up at that place at the end of Rise of Skywalker instead of the Emperor, where there's like Sith dudes chanting and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I imagine Vader in this book being.
If you think about the
like
root,
that kind of guy.
If you think about the root of evil force in the Empire being this guy falling to the dark side, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of a little bit more like simple, a little straightforward, a little more straightforward that way.
There are two. What you said has like 2 points. I want to address each one first. The first one being the Obi-Wan thing, because I laugh because I took a picture of this, because Obi-Wan is now famous for lying, but they describe in this when he's like, how did my father die? They were like, Kenobi hesitated and Luke sensed that the old man had no wish to talk about this particular matter. Unlike Lars, however, Kenobi was unable to take refuge in a comfortable lie, which made me literally guffaw because he's famous for being like, from a certain point of view, I didn't lie. And then he was like, he was betrayed and murdered. This book is like, Vader is not his father. Vader killed his father.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's two different people, and they're even like, this guy doesn't lie. I'm describing to you for the first time this guy's characteristics. He's not a liar.
He's a monk.
So,
he's a space monk.
Like, not only does he tell them that, they even go as far as to be like, and this guy is not a liar. So you're like, yep, it seems pretty cut and dry. And it makes more sense for everybody's interactions that that's the case. That Darth Vader is not Anakin Skywalker. That, like, Kenobi was a, like, friend and mentor type to Anakin, but literally the master of Darth Vader, who is, like we say in the movie, he even calls him Darth. So you're like, it's not a title.
Yeah.
That's that motherfucker's name. His name is Darth Vader.
Darth Vader, Dark Lord of Sith.
Yeah. Please, Mr. Vader was my father. Just call me Darth. Like,
it's clear that he knew him as Darth Vader when he was a Jedi.
and the second thing, which you were talking about, which is so about, like, we now think of, like, most magic and most stuff like a video game where it's like, this character has all these crazy stats. They throw fireballs. This reminds me of, like, when I was, like, watching Lord of the Rings.
Yes. Like
like
Strider, how
Gandalf,
Strider and Gandalf have weird magic.
Their magic isn't like magic missile. It's not, like, so video gamey. It's like they are in tune with the universe.
They have ways, yeah.
Like, you could just shoot him and he would die, but he is smart and, like, thinks well, so it's almost, you know, like when they're like, oh, the power of the Force is so much greater than the Death Star, and they're like, ha ha ha, you're like, except that you're thinking in just terms of raw firepower. Yeah. The ability to manipulate events on a galactic scale is larger. It's less visually impressive than this, and Obi-Wan in this is quintessential Gandalf magic.
Yeah.
His
Dude,
stuff,
those little scenes of him on the Death Star are so cool in this, where he's like,
they're like
using
the shadows.
Yeah.
He's like manipulate. It's like not. It's not like
It's things that are harder to do.
He's not a conjurer of cheap tricks.
Yeah, it's
like,
things that are harder to do in film. Like, you realize that 1970s, early 80s cinematography cannot do the things that Force should be able to do, which is fascinating.
When we get to the part about him being struck down, that is especially true. Like,
well, okay, all right. So let's just get into it.
You want to do the
we can, like, jam through and then just stop if something like agrees with us. We start in the same place as we do. Obviously, I just read the version of the scroll It's like very much not a scroll. It's very much like a beautiful intro to a fantasy book.
It's high fantasy. Yeah,
You know in a fantasy book, like the author like goes hard for like 3 pages and then like goes back to like normal prose after that.
Right.
That's how it feels in this.
There's always the like debate about whether it's sci-fi or sci-fantasy, and the bones of this are absolutely fantasy, but they do more than anything else dive in a couple times to over science when they're explaining like how drives work on a ship. There's like you have the anti-grav drives and then the super light drives.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, this is like mostly. It's like a marbled steak where it's like mostly fantasy, but there's little bits of like
but if you're gonna,
science.
you can get into like the lore of like some spell demons and shit. Like there's nerdy shit.
But you even get good stuff that's not like where he's like, there was a republic. It doesn't matter when it was. It's just there was one.
Yeah,
that feels very like fableish.
I dig that a lot more.
Yeah, they're like, don't worry about it. Just all you have to know is that it was and it was big and then it fell.
Yeah. So
one of the things I think is interesting about what you were saying is I wrote this down as just another quote that I thought was funny. The way the droids talk to each other, I think, fills that quotient for sci-fi stuff, because it's always like, oh, R2, my servo motor connected to my processing matrix is liquefied.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I don't know what any of that means, but like he's a droid.
R2D2 seems
Well,
like
we have servo motors. They're just like simple, basic motors that work on.
Yeah.
I think it's like a lot of like old science fiction was like the authors loved scientific journals, and it's almost like they read something and like without knowing really much, they're like, okay, this term, I'm gonna write
every
some
episode of Star
speculative
Trek.
thing off
there's
of
not
it.
a lot of
Every Star
technology.
Trek.
There's not a lot of technology left that's like inconceivable. to us.
reading like Lovecraft, and there's random little scientific instruments, and I get the vibe that he like read a journal and was like, how can I work one little bit of science to make my like cosmic stuff seem more real?
Sure.
But it's so like you just named it so specifically that it sounds like really like
Sextants don't even do that, bro.
Yeah. What the hell, bro?
Yeah.
So there's like all different colors of laser light, which is pretty interesting in this version of the Tantive 4. I don't even know if it's called the Tantive in this version. There's a weird thing where the stormtroopers and Darth Vader like come in through the roof in this version, which is pretty cool.
This is tight, and I think like this and other stuff, like basically any of the lightsaber stuff, the action, maybe because it's a book and it doesn't rely on 70s cinematography, is like tight.
It's very, very bloody.
So I have some quotes to read in a sec, but yeah, like instead of them cutting the door, they fucking drop down through the fucking roof like SEAL Team 6.
Yeah.
But then again, how do you, in the 70s, make that look cool for Vader? You
Right.
can't. So he has to walk through the door, which is imposing because he's
Right.
huge. But in the book, they drop... And it makes sense because when you look at a Star Destroyer, and even, for example, at the end of Rogue One, you can see the way the Tantive would fit inside a ship. You wouldn't walk in through the door.
Right.
It's above them. So you'd walk on a platform and come in through the roof.
100%.
It makes perfect sense.
It's a lot more like just like make like anywhere that a hallway would be on a boarding craft, you would go straight in, which would be the outside, which would be the roof.
Yeah.
Period. Anyway, so basically the same scene otherwise. Like C-3PO kind of like, it feels like maybe he's high when he sees Princess Leia give the message to R2 in this version.
Oh, well, can I give you some quotes?
Yeah.
Just because it's this part. So they drop in, and the first thing that happens is like the stormtrooper gets headshot, and they said a beam of intense light struck the head, sending pieces of armor, bone, and flesh flying in all directions.
Yeah, dude.
And then,
Insane.
C-3PO describes it as like the screams of the injured and dying humans.
Yeah.
But he gets like, doesn't he get knocked into wires, and like R2 is cutting him out, and he gets shocked? Because I think that's how they basically describe R2 had a whole interaction with Leia, but he like doesn't remember it. But I think it's because he got like bodied in this fight.
Yeah, it's supposed to be something like I think in the actual show we cut to another scene for a minute before we cut back to C-3PO and R2-D2.
Yeah, the movie version is like cut. It's very quick. This R2 and 3PO have moments, and they run. There's like a whole bit of them like, oh no, we won't get away this time. And that's in the movie, but it's like a bit in this book.
Yeah.
It isn't just a few lines as they run through a hallway. Yeah.
There's no Antilles here. Which is funny because later they like specifically call out that the name Wedge Antilles is like really strange for some reason.
I thought that was hilarious, which is like,
The unlikely,
when you don't know names, saying the unlikely named Wedge Antilles is like, is that unlikely?
Yeah.
You also have a guy named like John D, and then also like it's weird how many random names.
My boy Pops, dude, Rip Pops.
I wrote down these names. They are barely characters, but when Luke at the beginning goes to Anchorhead and he meets a bunch of characters, they are named Fixer, Cammy, Windy, and Deke, and they call Luke Wormy.
Wormy, dude.
Wormy.
Hold on, we're gonna save all that wormy talk for when we get there, because that was like,
we're pretty much there. So basically, you get the scene where they get on the escape pod. They're not supposed to be there, and then it's like, "Sir, should I shoot the escape pod?" And they're like, "No, it's a waste of lasers. It's dead." And Vader's like, Vader like knows everything that's happening.
It's so interesting because the things that happen in the movie we have like made jokes about, like Blue Milk. Family Guy makes fun of the laser stuff. They like did those little short stories, but the way they explain it here, I forget exactly. But it almost is like, yeah, of course. Like we're like, why didn't they just shoot it? And it's like they're a massive bureaucracy. They scanned it. They're like
Vader was also just like, let's see.
He heard about it later though, and he was like, go chase him. But if you're the officer, they're like, whatever, the like snooty, the way they describe it, it doesn't feel like a plot hole or like a contrivance. It feels like, yeah, why they wouldn't waste their time with it. It makes perfect sense.
Sure.
But Vader, I'm so wondering when I read this, I'm like, because this is the first bit of Star Wars, how many of those like, and we're probably that sometimes, obnoxious, like the book was better. Like how many people went to the movie being like, you guys don't even know what you missed. Like the book snob.
100%.
Because the action is
Leia
so
headshots.
much. Do you remember he kills the captain?
Yeah.
And then after he's dead, they describe he then crushes his neck, and they said that he throws
him.
his body across the hall like a doll.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's already brutal the way that he chokes him and just like drops him, but the idea that he just throws him like a rag doll and like massacres or like mutilates his corpse is like
another reason.
Holy shit.
Another reason I'm so thankful for Rogue One. Just
that hallway scene.
That hallway scene is
straight out of this book. Yeah.
It's like they got the ability to actually visualize how savage this version of him
guaranteed,
is. He's a murder. He's like a killer.
Like guaranteed, whoever wrote that movie read this book. Like so much in here.
I did putting it out there. I don't think this is true, but I would say there is enough circumstantial evidence in this book that Vader let them escape and sat back and was like, I'll show Tarkin, stupid idiot, and I will let him loot. Vader makes it out of this.
Like his plan goes one step farther even than it says in the book, and that he was playing everyone pretty much.
Yeah, literally he's just like, you all made fun of my stuff. You don't think being a Dark Lord's cool? Fine. I don't need your stupid... I'll be a part of this.
It was his plan to use them to find the base.
I
don't know that I believe that he like intended for the Death Star to be destroyed, but it would be
plausible.
Like if that was how it went, I would be like, yeah, this does. It's like in this and other stuff, it's so clear that Luke and Leia are not fucking siblings,
right?
But
the last
we accept
of this book,
yeah. But like that if that was the way it went, I would be like, completely. You could even see that it's laid out here.
But even in serials, like the idea of something so crazy happening is not that crazy. Like having like a weird soapy twist like that, like soap operas and radio serials were written like day to day. You know what I mean? Like
the dude escapes in the end in a way that's like crazy.
I'll get you.
Plus, the guy who shouldn't have any ability to land the shot, it just feels like all according to my evil plan. And it could be.
He even talks when I watch the movies, I have always thought of Tarkin and Vader as a like team.
Yeah.
Like they are aligned and their personal ambitions don't overlap so they're able to like respect each other.
This book is different.
They are adversarial, and with the added context of the Emperor being a fucking joke.
Everyone's vying for Game of Thrones.
Prime time. Yeah.
Before he would want to keep the Death, even though he doesn't like the Death Star, he'd want to keep it because his dad, his boss, the Emperor, needs it. And here you're like, he even expressly. There's a great line where he looks around and he's like, I have no equal. Like, he's like lamenting that there is no one of equal to him that he can contend with. Like, he's like bored by how, and he's like, I'll have to get rid of Tarkin eventually, but for now it's fine. And with those kind of lines, you're like, whether he intended to or not,
he comes
out exactly because he's like, I don't need this for my plans.
The Death Star wasn't part, like, he mocked the Death Star. He was like, I got to get rid of Tarkin. And then on that ship were a bunch of competition, like, officers in the Navy and Army that were just in his way, and they're all dead now. I would have been like,
it's very
that's a cool
it's very Kylo Ren
thing.
Like, you know where Kylo Ren is at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, where he's just like on a bender, basically murdering people.
That's Vader.
That to me is what this Darth Vader is he's just like a bastard.
That's actually like, and I think what, now that I'm thinking about it, was so compelling about Kylo, even in the first one, when he's just like Darth Vader, like basically just like the guy with the plan, he's stronger than you and he's fucking smarter than you. Yeah. It's so much cooler than like Vader that's going to have to be a bootlicker eventually. Like, imagine the guy who's like, I got all the power and I have plans and I'm unafraid to do them. It's a very like, you're a good villain. Like, I'm excited to watch you cut swaths of people aside.
And they make the galaxy feel so much bigger than the movie. So it feels like, oh, Vader could be in the middle of nowhere plotting a thing while on the other side of the galaxy, a whole other thing's happening. In the movies, it seems like everything is a 5-minute hyperspace jump away, and it's just, and it's always like, well, everything's on Tatooine, and everything's on Coruscant. This makes it feel like that fantasy epic where we are seeing a slice of the universe,
very Lord
and
of the
there's
Rings
so much more galaxy to experience, and they keep doing away with that in the actual Star Wars canon, where it's like, no, everyone knows everyone, and this feels crazy to me that this is
it's like cooler and more realistic. That it's a big, like, think about how big just the planet is. Now imagine they're like the 10,000 systems that make up the like galactic center or whatever. You're like, you should be able to fuck off forever. Like, you should get lost and be gone. It's all of space.
And they say the whole idea about Tatooine, there's like, I think, I don't remember who has the conversation, but two of the characters, it might be Biggs and Luke, who are just like, the Empire doesn't even care about this place. They don't want to come here. Nobody comes here.
Right.
And that kind of thing, it feels that way in the book, and for a little bit in the first movie. But by by Return of the Jedi, everyone just is on Tatooine at all times.
Yeah.
Crime lords and like and bounty hunters, everyone.
But you know what? We always criticize the new movies for that, but
it started then.
Real talk, like you're on Tatooine like every video game.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
I think people just think of Star Wars. But more to your point, this is an adaptation of the movie, and it feels like the details and the world building feel so unfocused on the plot of this book that it just really feels a lot more real to me. It feels a lot more like a full experience of a place, just because the details and stuff are not really like trying to set up another Disney Plus series.
It is like when you were saying a person reading it, because one of the things I kept writing down was this book, they go into detail on things that don't need detail, and then in describing a person, they don't tell me anything about that person. But if you think about it as a dude telling you the story that he read in the Book of Wills, which is what the beginning sets up,
right?
I super dig it. I like that it's like, imagine a guy in his like...
It's like a dude from the 70s telling you this.
Yeah, in his pit, in his house, his like house, living room pit thing, whatever that's called, and just sitting there sipping like a gin, being like, so there I was on Tatooine.
Well, and because they spend more time with stuff, even if it doesn't matter to the story, the history of Tatooine, but I didn't know that the humans are not native, like they're colonizers. Like when they get into describing like, you know, Jawas and sand people,
like maybe
they don't know. They're like, they think it might be this. And then they kind of explain like, oh, well, the sand people are actually a native species.
Yeah.
The humans stick to their parts because they're like colonizers. And that alone is like, I never even
It
thought
makes
about
sense,
that.
yeah.
It also then makes sense why there is a big schism. And also, like, I always thought moisture farming was literally they were just trying to, like, farm water.
No, they're making clouds.
But it sounds like the Vaporators, because they keep talking about farming, I think they also, like, they're like, we need you for the harvest. I think that they're not just, their crop isn't water. They have Vaporators so that they can try and actually farm regular vegetables, but on the harsh conditions.
Am I wrong in assuming that the way I always thought that it was pooled water from the air. But I guess what in the book is saying
that is
it
what
makes
it is.
clouds, and the clouds rain, and that's how they collect the water.
It's Dune again. Yeah, it's literally like the plan is all the farmers working together are eventually going to turn Tatooine into. They actually mention it in here. Like they say, like
they're terraforming.
Yeah, they're like slowly terraforming the planet into like a grass planet. So it's kind of like it. I mean, it's fucking Arrakis, dude. Like it is. Like
it really is
crazy.
And then they also talk about. Actually, I didn't even think about that exactly. Like do you remember when R2's going through the canyon alone, and they talk about there's like mist, like there's like it fogs or something, and they're even like they don't actually they theorize it might be like
moisture.
It's from like it evaporates in the heat of the day, and then at night it condenses down
because of the two suns, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. You mean Tattoo 1 and Tattoo 2?
Also, the way they describe the planet, I think, is not hyper descriptive, but beautiful in the fact that they're like, for a lot of the time when people flew by, they thought it was a third sun. That's how bright and messed up Tatooine was, and no one would ever stop there. I'm like, that's kind of beautiful that it was. You can see the brightness of it and why people would be like, what a. They also, not for a while do they describe it. I don't remember what page it is, but it's not right away. It's like many pages in where they finally say sand.
Yeah.
Tatooine's described as like flat plains and
hot.
Yeah, just like a hot. I don't even know what you would like. It's not a desert world.
Yeah, I don't know.
You think of it as like hot normally, like, oh, that sucks. This made me, because they can describe it, be like, oh, they're like, if you're out in the sun without sunscreen, you will die. Like, they're like, it makes it like, not only is it hot, it's fucking dangerous.
Brutal, yeah.
Don't be out, don't do it. And I'm like, it made me like respect Tatooine for a second before. I'm like, it's just a lame place. I'm like, no, it's also a deadly place.
They even talk about dudes glistening with sunscreen oil and stuff. I think that's hilarious.
Dude, Mos Eisley, they were like, a large portion of that city is underground. And I was like, I had never even thought that there is a bustling underground. That's so cool. Why did we never see that?
You know what's crazy though? It is true. Like in the movie, like it explain, like they don't really get into it because it's a fucking movie, but like it is just designed that way. Like even
when you go into the bar, it's down steps.
It's down steps. The docking bay 94 type shit. It's like all kind of like level, like the opening is like level with the ground and it's all below. Like it's there. It's just not. You don't think about it in terms of logic because you're just watching it and you're just following the action of the story.
Right.
But it's kind of neat to decide what details are important to you in Star Wars because they're all here because it's all words. I don't know. It's interesting to read a straight adaptation like this. But yeah, let's get into it. So Leia domes two stormtroopers right in the head.
Again, they describe it like
blows their brains
melted
out.
Like bone and plastoid or whatever.
She gets knocked out by an energy pole or something.
Yeah, she gets tapped with an energy pole.
It isn't a circle of blue that gets her.
That sick sound. And then we get the Tashi Station Anchorhead scene, which was filmed for the production of the movie. There's I forget what it was. When I was young, I had like some book or something that had like photos of this with Mark Hamill and Biggs and stuff.
Interesting.
You can like find this on YouTube. They have like the
absolutely.
reels of this.
But yeah, it's an interesting scene. We kind of got into it. Basically, Biggs is in town because he's just about to leave. He's going to see all his friends one last time. Luke is there. He's like, I think I saw a battle, and they're like, "Shut up, you dumb baby." And he's like, "What? Come on, Wormy."
Yeah, it's so weird, and I'm glad that they cut this out. Probably like Wormy he's like restless, and he's always he just doesn't want to be there. They call him Wormy. He's like a nerd.
It feels like a fantasy thing, like the young squire. Like, oh, that's just Wormy. He's nobody.
Because it's just the hero. Like, it's exactly the Joseph Campbell thing. It's like that to a T. He's a fucking farm boy.
He's
like
the dude from How to Train Your Dragon.
Never fit in at home, but like destined for greatness. And I've always like wanted, I feel like we talked about this during the Rogue One stuff. Like I like Biggs, when you're the hero of the universe's best friend, I'm like, I want to know a little more about you. This is like Bucky and Cap before the super soldier serum. This is like, Biggs is fucking cool. He's the coolest dude. He like went to the academy, but he's like, yeah, I got an Imperial assignment. I'm going to fucking join the Rebellion.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to jump off a ship the next chance I get and go join the Alliance. It's like, oh.
But it's cool because he's the hot guy, but he cares. It's like, it's like quintessential. Everybody like respects him. And
it's
then
like Magnum PI.
He calls like, his nickname for Luke is Hotshot. Like he calls him that a bunch, and he like treats him like so cool. So this, even though I'm like glad this wasn't in the movie, it would add nothing to the movie. It adds a lot because especially the end, the Death Star, the trench, the X-Wing stuff is like so much more blown out, and there's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And like Biggs gets killed in the movie, but he gets killed in the translation of like, he is actually an important minor character, or what do you call it? Like a supporting
he's part
character.
Of the plot.
Yeah. He's an important, and he's sort of not that important in the movie, but it's cool that he gets.
It's the screen time difference, right? Like in the movie, we barely see him. We don't care about him really. When he dies, we don't care that it's like, oh, that sucks for Luke. I guess that was his friend. Here, very important. Again, this goes back to when we were talking about the end of Rise of Skywalker. A main character in the books killed on screen does not matter to an audience or to anyone.
Or his stepfather.
Yeah, or his stepfather who's in the scene with him. Doesn't matter because it's one of those, it's in the movie thing, and unless you read the books, same thing here. Unless you read this book, you would have no backstory. Although they have in recent years fleshed out that thing a little bit more.
I'm simultaneously glad that it happened and glad that it's not in the movie, but I like reading the movie as I watch it being like, yeah, this is the same Luke that went through that.
And with the book, it's probably best that the most Biggs we get is this, because when you have spin-offs, those characters need to become the heroes of their own thing.
Yes.
And that already dilutes what they are. Here, he got to be an important minor character, and he died, and there's not like a book where he's the hero. Like,
right.
He got to be himself. He lived and died as he did.
He had a little
and that's
arc.
good.
Yeah, he had a little beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Then you get Leia Vader scene, where similar to the scene.
It does play out like the movie, yeah.
Yeah. Except the fun thing about this is that the
She
different
spits
thing
on him.
Well, the different thing is that Vader goes, "Tell them we killed them." Like he's like, yo, tell the Emperor or whatever, or like tell the officers that this ship was destroyed and there were no survivors. Also follow that thing. We need those spy tapes. He's like, I'm covering this up. Like this is his thing now.
Him being, and maybe that's how we should have read it always, but literally I just grew up with all the other Star Wars stuff out. Him being the actual villain and not like a lackey is super tight, and
so much better.
That's what most of the people I would imagine in 1977 assumed.
Yeah.
Because we didn't, I think, just to give you a timeline, my parents' first date, or one of their first dates, was to see Empire Strikes Back.
Wow.
So, like, that's
a great love story for them, too.
Yeah. You know, but that's kind of the vibe. I think we forget this, when Empire Strikes Back came out, people were either blown away by the twist or hated it.
Yeah.
Like, people were vocal about not liking the twist that Vader was the dad.
The movies with Mikey about that, if you go watch, it's like Film Joy, whatever it is, on YouTube. He has like all these like quotes from people in the paper and stuff, and one of them, like, there's people who are like in denial. People are like, I think his real father's Boba Fett, and then he's gonna like take off his mask and reveal that he's Boba Fett and kill Darth Vader. Like, there's just people who are trying to like make their cooler version in their head.
But imagine it's the same, like, at that point, there was like this book, the movie,
right,
and like,
and Splinters in
everybody's like
Mind's Eye,
with those little bits of information. You were like, what? And given this book, I don't know what Splinter of the Mind's Eye is.
Yeah.
So I don't really know
either. Yeah,
I bet, and we're gonna get there because we're going through this brick by brick.
Yeah.
We'll in a couple episodes be like, yeah, it doesn't really, like, I could see why you would be like, no, that doesn't make any sense.
But it like totally does. Like, it's totally like for the purposes of the larger plot at hand, I'm willing to swallow this change. And I think it's interesting also to track how loose all this stuff is. Like, compared to the current canon, like a lot of these things like this are going to be very loose throughout the Legends books and stuff that we read are going to be a lot of like things. Well, that's not exactly how that happened over here, or like
there is loose shit in this book. I don't need to read it all, but I'll just explain it to you. What Luke's relationship to Ben Kenobi changes every scene it's talked about. At first, he's like, "Oh, he's an old guy. I haven't really spoken to him much."
Like,
when he comes around, my uncle chases him off. Later, he's like, "I've never met him. I think he died before I was born." And I'm like 60 pages ago, you were talking about how you've seen him, but you just haven't spoken to him directly. Like, literally, this own thing already is like, has Luke met him or has he not met him? What's going on? So like, sure, if it's that loose in its own book, I imagine we're going to hear like, that didn't happen that way in another book.
And it just doesn't matter because in the same way, like you were saying with Biggs, like it would be a problem if you were thinking about it in terms of like, well, that doesn't make sense because this character is going to have to go off and have his own goddamn show. And now we don't know what's going to be real. In this case, I'm just like, I don't really care because it's just like,
I'm not gonna like,
sci-fi.
It seems clear from this in the first movie that like a big shift happened with the second one, but it's like, even if it doesn't immediately be the most smooth thing, it gave us like the Star Wars saga.
It helps because it's earnest too. They're discovering it as they're writing it too. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and A New Hope is like so George's baby, and then Empire and Beyond are like, let's get the best people.
Like,
and they were probably like, because weren't there like a bunch of drafts famously of Empire that are all different? Like,
it's definitely still George's baby,
right?
But it's definitely like he was like, now that this is a thing, I need to like actually.
They're like,
people
let's, because they weren't even brother and sister in Empire. It wasn't until Jedi, but they were probably like, all right, we're gonna go more. This is famous enough. Like, we need to have a bigger bad because now we're gonna go with like, you see why they did it because the mechanism. So. It's not like, fuck you, actually, you're wrong all along. It's interesting, like, and because of what they did, we got to, if they didn't do that, I bet you, like, Star Wars would not have been as
it probably would
memorable.
It probably would have been successful, but then be done.
Well, and because of that shortcut or that change, the scene in, like, Luke's journey is even more important because it's not like he's avenging his father. He's, like, he's like avenging the sanctity of his father while becoming his own man. It's actually better, even if it wasn't initially decided.
What's beautiful about what we're doing with this show and with reading the old books, and the thing that I have come to appreciate having done this first book, is that we no longer have the burden of caring about if, like you were saying, the different things Luke says about Obi-Wan. We don't have to care about whether that's going to matter in the next thing or the thing after that.
The die's cast.
Yeah, it already happened.
This happened 40-some years ago.
We're just archaeologists.
Yeah, and we don't...
piecing it together.
Because it's not new canon, because everything isn't forceful, like, oh, it's got to connect in some way.
There's no implications.
What is like, we aren't sitting here being like, oh, that character, we just got the backstory of them. That backstory is so dumb. Why is that? Well, and we don't have to sit there and like try to piece together what everything means.
He
this
even said
exists.
Doesn't matter when the Republic. Don't even worry.
Yeah.
As far as you need to know, there was one, and that's it, and it's over.
And this just exists, and everything that's in it is like, well, yeah, okay, I'm glad I read that, and we dug deep into that, but on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And it feels good.
Yeah, it's happy.
Yeah.
It's happy.
Well, and like role-playing the person that doesn't know anything, and like, what is it like for you? Like, what are the implications? This thing, we know how it ends up, but yeah, for you, it could mean anything. It could mean...
Yeah.
So we get the droids splitting up pretty much exactly how the movie does it, except that it seems like R2-D2 can walk.
There are a couple of interesting things. Well, he shuffles in the movie, but...
R2 is clearly much more on a very specific mission in this. He even gets like a Rudy moment at the end, which is really funny.
They also describe droids a lot, and I don't know...
Mechanicals, you mean?
But they did. Right. They don't call them droids.
But they get into like... that there's differing levels of sentience. It's weird because they call R2 3 different things. At first, they call him a thermocapsulary dehousing assister. Then later, he's referenced as a repair unit. And then in the third act, he's an astromech. So like...
and an R2.
He takes on different
but
jobs.
I'm saying like what they call him is different.
Well,
Whereas
they call all of them R2s. Even like all the different X-wings have R2s, which is not how they're designated in the actual. There's only one R2, I think. Or
no, the R2.
No, there's like R2 M4.
Yeah, there's
R2,
R5 D4, R3. Like they're not all R2.
I think they did that with changing the names overall because it was easier to identify them as like
names.
A kid. Yeah,
But like,
in the
but they're
world,
supposed to be on.
It's a model number. There's a bunch of R2 units.
Right.
People we know and love droids from like following them throughout the series, and also because as storytelling, and even before Disney literally bought it, the sort of Disneyification of stories where like everybody is nice to droids because that's what nice people do. Nobody gives a shit about droids in this because to them it's a Roomba. Like it literally, what they're able to do is because they get ignored because people, even the guys like the Stormtroopers, like he's like, what? I didn't know we had fucking 3POs. Jesus, this is a big fucking station. Yeah. Like that's it. Like that's all the mind when they're like, is it okay if I take him to go here? He's like, oh what? Oh, yeah.
They kind of feel that way about themselves too, which is pretty cool.
Well, C-3PO, because he is modeled after a human, and he's like, they describe how like why he's so human. He is like, no, R2 shouldn't be capable. He is a like more primitive robot. He doesn't have. They're like. They shouldn't be able to lie. They don't have the complex brain power to do this. It's really like we just think of like, oh, they're just like people, but they beeps and boops. In this, they are differing levels of smart devices, and nobody thinks of them, even if they have a personality. Like Luke speaks to them and even acknowledges to himself that he's like he learns to care for C-3PO over it, and that's weird. Whereas now we see it as everybody cares, but it's
right.
It's cool to be back in an era where like. A vacuum is a vacuum, and people don't have to be so caring about them because we're all good people. It's just
real.
Real.
It feels more real.
Luke in the beginning, like straight up ditches a droid. Like he just doesn't. He's like, I'll buy a new one. I need to be alive. I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, he literally just leaves it. And then we get C-3PO starts to like pass out and gets abducted by the Sandcrawler. Then we get like part 2 of the Luke and Biggs scene where he says he's actually joining the rebellion.
Right.
And Biggs leaves and Luke's like, I have to stay one more year. Whatever. I'll see you soon. And then you get the R2 scene.
Can we talk about something in this scene?
What?
I think Luke was about to hit a girl, and I need to get the exact quote.
That's in the first scene. Where he's about to like take a swing at her.
The girl, like the girl who's sitting on the lap of the dude who's like, he's like, get your hands off of that.
So like when he's like at the moisture, whatever, is looking up and he sees the ships and he sees laser fire, and then he rushes to wherever that is. That's not the scene.
This is the scene that's just Luke and Biggs.
Okay,
but
he rushes and meets them. Is like, guys, there's a space battle, and they go look up on the binoc, and they've stopped shooting at this point. They're like, no, there's not. And this girl that like makes fun of him, calls him Wormy, like grabs the binoculars from him and like smacks them, and he takes like a step towards her, and then her boyfriend steps between them, and he backs up, and I was like, was he gonna hit her?
Yeah, that's when he's like, get your hands off of those. When he's talking, like,
here it is. She grabs it from him and says, don't worry so much, Wormy, she sneered. Luke took a step toward her, then halted as the huskier mechanic easily interposed himself between them and favored Luke with a warming smile. Luke considered and then shrugged the incident away. And I was like, were you gonna...
Luke
she busted up your thing, you took a step towards her, and then her boyfriend stepped between you, and then you backed off. I'm like, were you gonna hit Luke Skywalker, hero of the Republic?
I feel like
I hit a lady?
Based on everything that we've talked about already, and just the way that they describe even Luke and humanity, the Republic, the Empire, whatever, doesn't come off as good people in this.
No.
Every single, like you were saying, the colonizers, they go around the galaxy, they're all kind of assholes, and it's fascinating to see that the book doesn't shy away from that. It isn't like, oh, farm boy Luke. Luke, even in this book, is kind of like sassy as hell.
He kind of
there
is
are lines he has
in the movie. He's kind of a little nasty
because
boy.
he has to grow, so he has to be like imperfect. And I mean, it probably started with the enhanced editions where they tried to change Han from shooting to like oh, because shooting and killing is bad, and you're like,
dude,
look at the world. People are people. People aren't movie characters that are always good. We are shitbags, and we're just trying to get along. And
the whole story
it's realer that happens.
The whole story, especially in the book, is a bunch of shitbags coming together to do good,
to save the
they
world.
even open with like they were hero. What was the thing? Like they were just they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So of course they became heroes.
Yeah,
like,
naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's how it happens.
I think I'd love that more. I love the idea of a bunch, and it's a trope that nowadays plays often. It happens all the time. But in the 70s, the idea of like a bunch of like
assholes,
we're kind of assholes, and we're all on a ship together, and we got to go save a princess who is kind of an asshole, and we all have to go defeat an empire that's worse than all of us, which is super interesting.
Well, and there's like regular levels of noble, and then there's like movie noble where you're like the person is like declaring grand things, and here like fucking Obi-Wan is like the most noble person, but he doesn't always tell everybody what they have to do. He's like clearly wise and world weary enough that he will suggest, but even he's like, they're young and they're gonna do it, and I have to do my own thing, and hopefully they'll figure it out. It's like refreshing to just have heroes that are like a little bit more grounded in how people actually react, instead of always just being like, this is the rightest thing to do. Like they get to get messy and then figure it out, and it's more rewarding to like experience that.
Oh yeah.
I'm also pretty sure that in this book, Luke is 20.
Yeah.
I think they said
he's a young boy.
So like he is in the movies, he is like, oh, we can like he's young, he's learning. 20, dude has lived 2 decades on this planet. He's an asshole.
He's like
That's who
he's
he
like
is.
young and thirsty. Like literally, he gets obsessed with Leia, like from a hologram, like a hot. And it because he even describes it because he's like a little farm boy.
Yeah,
she's like you could tell she's from high society, and he's like drooling basically.
That's
and
why he's like, we gotta help her.
Yeah, and then there was even a part where Obi-Wan's like, and looks like, oops, I made it like a little too obvious that I'm too into the girl, and he's like, oh, you're like, yeah, it's not because you're doing the right thing. You're not doing the right thing, but like you're also a young man.
Yeah. And he doesn't
hot for sister.
And there is no like idea of the Jedi frown upon relationships. He's like, Luke, you dog.
Yeah, the Jedi has family. Yeah. It's so weird to like. His dad was a Jedi.
Yeah.
He wanted him to have the thing. It wasn't like
it wasn't an illicit relationship. It was your dad is your father.
It also makes sense when you take the context of like, okay, if he left the lightsaber to give to his son, and Darth Vader was him, why would you hide him in his family place? Like, if he was him, he would know to go there. It's very clear 100%. That like, if the galaxy's a big place, Tatooine's nothing. Why the fuck? How would Darth Vader know where the fuck he's like? This other guy that's met, like, you have no idea. That'd be the perfect place to hide him.
Yeah, exactly right. Which makes sense. Then we get R2 getting paralyzed by the Jawas and sucked in. We get some fun stuff about the Jawas.
They're so racist.
Well, they talk about how Jawas like smell like shit and like have flies on them and stuff.
This is the meanest.
They're subhuman. They're like the what are those things called? The Aloy, the Morlocks.
The Morlocks,
yeah. They're supposed to be like
there
might be humans that just like turned into wretched little bastards. The language apparently randomizes itself.
It's so like only Jawa. That more is just a weird error where they're like it's ever evolving and only they can understand each other. And then later when he's doing business with Owen, they're like there's a line. They can be understood when they want to be understood.
Well, maybe they can speak English or basic, whatever it's called.
Maybe, except for I'm pretty sure they describe that they're just like chirping, and it's just funny because it feels like a person telling you a story, and then they're like, did I say that?
By the way,
they can be understood
they
sometimes.
Can talk to each other,
like if you just read it from that aspect,
it reads well, yeah,
and it makes it a fun experience.
Absolutely.
Then we get to the scene, the choking scene, which in this context, number one, no Admiral Mahdi here. Instead, there's Ramodi, who has facial scars. Don't know who that is exactly, but I think
not a character from the movies.
I think
for sure.
Tag is the one who gets choked here, but it's basically the same scene, except that the context of the scene is not that they are like cheersing about the Death Star being operational. They are cheersing about the old republic, the last remnant, quote, the last remnants of the old republic have finally been swept away because it's them castrating the Senate, basically. But other than that, it's the same thing. Tag gets choked out. This is a scene we've seen a million times. It's just a little bit more we talked about it already, but like, it's just a little bit more interesting because there's like this political machination happening as well, and it's a little bit more finger on the pulse than it is in the movie.
Sure.
Then we're back in the Sandcrawler. Yeah.
Sorry, I just saw a note that I had from earlier that's relevant. Why it's so important that they chase down and get this loose end, and why actually Rogue One doesn't make a lot of sense. They say that they beamed the plans off, and then they all killed themselves before they could be caught. So there would be no Rogue One because they literally, when Vader was about to get them, they all killed themselves.
Right.
Which was like
that's not canon in the movies, but
no. But that was like an interesting. That to me,
it's more hardcore for sure.
It also helps sell, and especially like because it never comes back. That like death ball torture device, it's really a lot less like it's pretty violent and pretty crazy, and like the idea that you would kill yourself rather than talk to Vader is even like now in some of the stuff, the people that work in Vader's like squad are like, fuck yeah, I get to be whatever. But here they're like, it's like almost battle meditation, but the reverse. They're like, when Vader is around, you like want to get away. You want to not be around.
He's scary. Like he has like an aura.
He actually,
yeah.
But in that scene, the note that I wrote down that I thought was super funny is when they're all sitting around talking, the way that they sell the like magician tricks of Vader is he straight up just like sucks up a cup with the Force.
And they're like, that's stupid, Vader.
Yeah, they're like, Vader, you can just pick it up, bro.
Stop being a dick, bro.
And I think that idea of just all the guys being like, oh God, this guy was an
fucking
asshole.
Mage, dumbass, magic.
Well, because the Jedi, which I guess they haven't explained it, but they're basically like they were and then they weren't. So for them, and they were killed by like a vague amount of betrayal. Like we don't know what happened. So I could believe that for them, they're like, fuck off, Jesus, you're boring me, Vader.
Well, this is all we've got. So it flies. Yeah,
but we have no timeline. So we don't know that what we know now, which is literally like
they died
20 years ago. They wiped out real quick. That's
why it's so fun to read through it like this.
We have no timeline.
Well, and then also is that the scene? There's one scene where they really tell you what they think of. Like Vader makes a sarcastic like, hey, for the glory of the Emperor, right? And like everyone's like, yeah. And then you're like, okay. Then he is a bullshit politician because the Emperor we know is like, I got fucking jazz hands, bitches. Like you wouldn't do that.
No.
Yeah. Then we get the Sandcrawler scene. This pretty much plays out exactly how it is, where they're gonna go buy the droids and they pick C-3PO, and then because he can speak Bocce, and then the other droid gets picked. But then
you mean V is my middle name for versatility? Oh, that's a weird. The changes are that C-3PO where he's like a huckster. He's like weird.
I love that he's like Bert from Sesame Street more in this.
Yeah. They have
Squidward.
I don't know that it really like matters for this, but it is interesting. Like, in this, the Jawas give him a bad thing and whatever, but they kind of go out of their way to be like, they're like friendly and skittish, but you don't fuck with them.
Yeah,
like you don't push them hard.
You don't want this to become a bloodbath. Right now. Yeah.
They make it kind of seem like they give him the droid as a make good, but they go out of their way to describe like, this actually could have gotten bad. It's not just like, oh, it's funny. They're negotiating. Like, you got to be careful because they actually might like kill you and move on.
Yeah, so 3PO gets R2 picked, and then they bring him in, and then they do the bath scene. Luke's still thinking about Biggs, and then he finds out, 3PO, what? Like, you used to be in the fucking rebellion, what? And then he's cleaning him, and then the message pops out, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, this is the first draft version, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only remaining hope, happens. And then later, she doesn't even say that when he listens to the whole message.
Yeah.
But
that was just the very beginning of it.
Yeah, R2 says, oh, I'm actually property of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Luke's like, Ben Kenobi? And then R2 like...
Which in the book, the idea of changing your name from Obi-Wan to Ben isn't any better explained. It's also dumb.
Like, whatever. I think here it's a little bit more like, we don't know that his name is Obi-Wan Kenobi. We don't know like what the deal is with Ben and Obi-Wan. We don't know what his name is or how his culture works. So it doesn't bother. Maybe like when you become a Jedi, you take a name just like you do when you're a fucking Sith. You know, I don't know, but it seems mysterious, which works for me. And then we get the thing where R2 like soft dicks Luke a little bit with the. He tells him like, hey, you know, if you do this, I might play the whole message. And then he's like, he does it, and then he's like, okay, now play the message. He's like, what message? And he's like, fuck you, man. You made me take off your fucking restraining bolt for this?
They go into a lot more detail about the restraining bolt. So, like, I don't know. It seems like a little feature in the movie, but here it's like the interpretation is like, fuck, he got me to, like, let him go.
Yeah.
Which he
took the leash off.
Which, like, I guess he did. Like, that is the bit. It's just, that's irrelevant, I think, in the movie plot. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Like, he runs off fine. But here it seems a lot more like...
Yeah, they just make a little bit more sense why.
Well, and because we've spent more time with Luke and knowing his, like, woes, they've established that Owen is, like, what's it called? He spent all of his money to get a bunch of new moisture evaporators so that, like, they're, like, cash poor right now, but, like, once one harvest comes in, they'll fucking have it. And so, like... he spent the last of their money on this thing, and it's not that big a deal in the movie. You're like, oh, he's gonna kill me. But here they've explained, like, no, like, this will go under and we'll be fucked if we lose these droids.
Yeah.
And it adds a different layer that's not important, but it is important for him.
It's just fun, yeah. And then
it does make you think what happens when, like, it's probably best that they were murdered brutally.
Yeah,
because if he would have taken those droids and leave, they would be equally screwed.
Yeah, they'd have been fucked over.
Yeah, Lars and Beru would have died anyway.
They would have starved to death, which is much worse. So then we get the scene where Aunt Beru calls him for dinner, and he's like, so the droids are talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is that Ben Kenobi? And Owen's like, no, he died. That's another guy. He died like when your father died. Don't talk about that again. And as a matter of fact, go erase the droid's memory when you go to Anchorhead tomorrow or whatever. And then he's like, okay, well, I want to go to the academy. And he's like, one more year, and then you can go to the academy. He's like, fuck you. And Luke leaves, and then Beru's like, Owen, like, what the fuck? Like, don't you know who his dad is? Like, he's not going to be a farmer. And Owen's like, that's what I'm afraid of. Then we get
just sitting outside,
the sunset
staring
scene.
at the binary suns. Yeah.
And then he goes to check out the droids. R2's run off. This is all the same as in the movie. He's like, fuck, my whole life savings is wrapped up in these droids. I got to go figure this out. Oh, yeah. Like Ferris Bueller style. Yeah. So he leaves before breakfast, and Owen's like, what? But Beru is like, oh, he just wanted a head start on the day. And Owen's like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Then we get to the like the do-back scene from the special edition, where the troopers show up and discover the pod. And then we get Luke and the Tusken Raiders, where he's like looking for them. And he almost gets like sniped.
We learned some interesting stuff about the Tusken Raiders in this. They're also like...
They actually like seem to be characterized a lot more like they are in like Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian.
They're native. They're at one, like, they're the Dune people. They're like, the way that they describe them is like, there is an uneasy truce, but it works. They're like, they kill a couple of humans, we kill a couple of them. Everybody, they live in areas that we don't want to live in, so it's not even that big of a problem.
Oh, you mean Dune?
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly,
it's like the Fremen, but like from the point of view of like a non-Fremen. Like you never get into the Fremen world. You never meet any of them.
You're right. Not once.
No, the same thing with the Jawas. It's like the ghost stories that, like, if you're like us and you're like, I want to know every single thing about these people. But if you're the people just trying to fucking live on Tatooine, you're not like, let's learn their ways. You probably like, I heard this from this person, and then that's good enough for you.
Most people living there don't want to live there. That's the thing. They're trying to get off.
But this, like, what happens here is like another one of those. I didn't know that was what they were going for in the movie because he just sort of like is looking and is there. But here they describe that he pops up from the sand, like the Tusken Raider. Like it's almost as if he traveled in the sand and he pops up and gets the.
Yeah, the movie just appears.
Yeah,
in this, there's
the idea is that he's like Batman level. Yeah,
right. Like yeah. I from watching those don't like Tusken Raiders are cool parts of Star Wars, but I never think of them on that level because they're not We don't go that far into
Well,
them.
guess what? We're
But
about to
when
in
they're
this podcast.
Right, but when they're described like this and they go into it, I don't know, it makes me have a new appreciation. They just seem like cool people or whatever, and now that they're described like this, I'm like,
It's hype.
they're tight. Like,
It's hype.
damn, they're like, I
But honestly,
respect it.
like, yeah, the Tusken Raiders are like one of the coolest things in Star Wars. I love them. We're only on chapter 5 of 13, so I'm going to move a little fast.
Yeah.
Luke droids Kenobi. This is the moment where you get the like, where like you find out that this is straight out of the movie. You find out you even get the hello there from R2, which I never realized that he says hello there. I mean, I knew he said it.
Hello there is like his first line.
I
Hello
know.
there.
I like know. You know what I mean? Like if I was watching A New Hope, I would like know to say hello there when Obi-Wan says hello there, but it never connected with me that like that's why.
Because you think
McGregor's-
prequel memes. You're stuck in that prequel
I
meme
just
thing.
it didn't occur to me that he was like calling back because
Who was I was talking like Schroeder or something, and then like they were like hello there, and I'm like, oh, like A New Hope, and he's like, no, like.
whoa.
I think he knows both, but he was explaining like, no, the internet doesn't think of that as Sir Alec Guinness. They
Right.
think of that as like, I guess that makes sense.
I just never put it together. I just never put it together. Ben Kenobi's there. It's exactly the thing. Of course I know him. He's me. That's that.
Yeah.
This scene.
This made me.
This is very much the movie.
It's the movie. It's so wild. I didn't realize. I never really thought about. They do the same bit with Obi-Wan and Yoda, where there's like they meet a little kooky, a little weird, and he's like, "Oh, the guy you're looking for, that's me." Like it's definitely like more kooky with Yoda, but there is like he's like a little whimsy. He's like a little trickster boy.
He also lives definitely in a cave here, which is interesting because in the show Obi-Wan that just came out recently, he is in a cave.
He is in a
He
cave.
hasn't like gone to his like weird like fuck cabin that he's got,
Yeah.
his Airbnb that he's got. He's just in like a weird like
They call it a.
yeah.
They
It's
describe
like
it as Spartan.
It's like True Detective Matthew McConaughey's apartment. That
But
has,
it's the
like,
same thing where if you look how Yoda lives,
Yeah.
Yoda doesn't live in a swamp cave. He lives
they're
in like
monks.
a swamp hut.
Yeah, they're monks.
Yeah.
Well, and I think because they describe like the sound he makes is the crate drag. Like they explain that all here, and I'm guessing that's how we all knew about that when we were kids. Like that was the call and everything else that he was doing. They also mention to like tease how mystical and cool he is. R2's hidden in the cave, and he like shifts, and he's like, the sound didn't even register to like the droid's sensor, and he was like.
He like
I
jumps,
see you.
He like
hello
jump
there. I
scared-
think that's when he's like, hello there. You can come out. I'm not going to hurt you.
He like jump scared a robot.
Yeah, they were just like, he can hear better than the robot. Like they like do they make Obi-Wan, like old Obi-Wan, like when you think of like, what's his, Auron from like, they make him the cool Ronin, like like, he's old, but he's like the coolest guy.
Yeah, exactly right.
And again, it hypes up the idea of the Force being. Obi-Wan has his Force things. Vader has his Force things.
I get the sense that
We're gonna
Jedi
get to that,
don't really.
and it's.
I get. The
I think
sense
we all
that-
got hype on the same thing.
I just get the sense that Jedi in general don't have like
Well, it's not
their
it's-
own. I think they all kind of have their own style of being a Jedi.
And that's what it felt. If you look at just the first three movies, you look at just like the works of the first books and things. Every Jedi has different things about him or her that make them a Jedi.
Even in all the legends, like
That's what- yeah.
Jaina Solo versus Jason Solo. You know, they're like one's like a pilot Jedi, one's like I talk to animals. Or
and it's not a thing where if you're a Sith, you definitely everyone has Force lightning. Like
Right.
what made the Emperor cool is because he was like, I don't even need a saber, bitch. Bwop. Like that was cool. And then suddenly everyone had it, and it was like, oh. Yeah. Or every Jedi suddenly wears the exact same robe. Or
that really is the crazy. Like when you look at Jedi from like the expanded universe, they all are like sick. They look like the Witchers. They
none
look
of
like-
them
yeah.
look the same. Even the Dark Jedi, one of them, like Executor Cedrus, just looks like a punk rocker.
Yeah.
like
I
all
love-
of them look
Dude.
totally different.
Yeah.
they're all wild, and that's what makes it fun because there is no like, oh, the Jedi were a group of these monks that did a thing. A Jedi were just a group of the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. It's actually much more accurate. to call
Well,
them that.
and because we're basically there, because he explains all of it, we can, I guess, dive into more of that. Like the Force, it's like an energy field. It's like both more scientific but more mystical at the same time. As it goes on, I think it gets video gamified, and they're like Force lightning and this and other stuff. But they're like, even the Jedi scientists don't really understand what it is.
Yeah.
It's a thing that you have to both like
like
not
God,
focus on to tap into, but you have to also learn to tap into it. It makes it just like very
It feels like Dale Cooper.
very less tangible, but no, like cooler for it. And yeah, like you say, like there's a Jedi pilot. Like you can be good at something. You're not all like, we all have lightsaber fights and we all do the exact same thing. It's like this person could be the healer Jedi.
You're not
like
just like a heightened unit.
Not everyone is
military
force
unit.
pushing or like
Right.
force choking or like force jumping. Everyone has a different, like, hey, I'm a force smart person.
I genuinely
Yeah.
think that the video games and stuff and like tabletop Star Wars and like just the fact that people wanted to make errata, like the school. I remember the Star Wars Insider that had the like different pieces on all the different lightsaber schools and stuff. In a way, that's really cool because it captures your imagination. It makes you go like, yeah. But then now, when you're writing Star Wars, you have to go back to the Bible and check the like which style now does Mace Windu use or whatever. It's kind of
Vapod.
Yeah, the hand cutting one. But yeah, real talk. Like, it's weird and it's much more interesting when it's not explained.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the scene we talked about a lot. We talked about all the stuff. He mentions the Clone Wars. He was betrayed and murdered by a very young Jedi named Darth Vader. There's no way that he would refer to his father
As
in
a
that
very young Jedi. named
Well,
Darth
we
Vader,
learned a bunch of cool stuff here. Like, he was like, Obi-Wan, I haven't like gone by that name since before you were born, Luke. And what my read was maybe too much. Old Ben is a nickname that Anakin gave him.
I thought it was.
By the way, like
'cause
we
they're
think
young.
of we think of Old Ben as a like hide yourself name, but he's like, no, since before you were born. Like I've been Ben forever. Like, and I don't know the way that he said it. I maybe just read this because I want to, but I read it as like your father gave me that nickname.
Interesting.
It's not like I'm not. It wasn't. I chose that. It's not a hiding name. It's a like. Yeah, everybody. Obi-Wan
assumed-
is like my Christian name.
I assume
Sure.
that was his like Jedi name.
Yeah, like Ben.
Ben is like the dude.
Well, it's like you guys call me like Gravy and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Gravis and everything.
Wormy,
Like
yeah.
cool guy.
Then we get a quick
cool
scene.
dude.
So now Luke feels like it's his destiny. He wants to meet that sexy lady, and he's like, "I don't own a droid, though. I don't own this droid, so we got to figure that out."
He was like, and it's really I think in the movie it's like I can't remember owning a droid, but they say I can't seem to remember owning a droid, least of all a modern R2 unit, which
Yeah.
is like hilarious that R2D2 is a
50-year-old
like
robot.
iPhone.
He's
shit.
a Nubian. He's Nubian.
What are we on? iPhone
13.
14.
He's like the
14.
iPhone 13.
Then we get the scene where
It's also hilarious because we've seen him go on adventures for 30 years, and you're like,
Right.
It's not really modern.
in the new version of this, Leia is tortured by Vader and Tarkin
Tarkin,
together,
yeah.
which is fucking weird. Then we get the Anchorhead scene where they're at Anchorhead. Kenobi sees like smoke, and
Do we want to talk about? There's a little bit more in the Obi-Wan scene to talk about.
What would you like to talk about?
They were when he was introducing them to lightsabers. He's like, at one time they were widely used. They still are, just in certain
Other
places of
places,
the galaxy.
yeah.
Just we've sort of like come to accept, although it's ever fluctuating, that like the Jedi gone, the galaxy forgot, whatever.
Only Jedi can use lightsabers, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I love
and
it when
here
somebody
they are.
doesn't bat an eye.
But it's like when you think about it, the galaxy is massive. Like it's insanely big. Yeah, and that they're like, no, they're rare,
A
but they're
laser
still
sword, of course.
used.
Yeah, of course somebody might use that.
And this
Yeah.
also is very Dune in the fact of like, we have to saber fight or fight with knives because
Yeah.
we have shields that can protect us from like blaster
Bullets.
fire. So, and that's
Listen,
the same thing.
say that the Dune next episode, the movie episode is like, oh my God, you fucking robber! I don't understand how you,
Dude,
I
the
don't understand how you did not get taken to court. But
craziest-
that's not here now.
The craziest thing is like there's just spice, dude. In this book, there's even spice.
Yeah.
So they roll up on the. Yeah.
Do we? Nope. Sorry, we're not there yet. I
No, they
apologize.
roll up on the sand crawler, which was attacked by quote unquote Tuskens. This is the same exact scene from the movie where Obi-Wan realizes, yada, yada, yada. And that will lead them back home.
That's Blastifire.
Yeah, it's like fake stormtrooper kill job.
Alan Dean Foster hates fucking Jawas. It's so funny. You can just feel like a little bit of like racism, like the way that they just describe Jawas. But even Obi-Wan, he took, like, they talk about how he's, and I think you see it, he basically takes all of their corpses and gives them like a proper burial.
Spiritual,
and
yeah.
even in Obi-Wan's mind, he's a little bit racist towards Jawas. Like, I forget the exact quote, but it's like, even despicable creatures such as these deserve a thing. And you're like, I just didn't get the read from the movie that Jawas were something to be so hated, but they go out of their way
nasty,
to negatively describe them at every fucking point. Poor Jawas.
It does have, again, it comes back to that, like, everything in this has a little tinge of colonialism and imperialism and the idea of like, yeah, we came here to their planet and we look down on them. And even though I, the enlightened Jedi Master, want to give them a burial, like, oh, they're so disgusting.
It feels like those
like
monkeys
even the
that
heathens
smoke
deserve
cigarettes
it.
or something. You know, like in Thailand, like you're like, oh, look at these little gross monkeys that smoke cigarettes and like steal your playing cards or whatever. Like that's the vibe of Jawas. Then we get Vader, Tarkin, Tag, and Mahdi now, who's now there. And they're like, oh,
Mahdi too hottie.
They decide interrogation isn't working, so they're gonna blow up Alderaan, but they never do it. They just talk about that would be a great idea because it would really show off the station. And then we get the moment where Luke decides I want to learn to be a Jedi like my father, which is cool. That's them at the Sandcrawler wreckage again because these scenes are kind of unfolding at the same time. Then they decide to head.
These are the kind of things that feel definitely movie, like it's how it happens in the movies, but you're like, they have like little sub chapters like where they just check in with Obi-Wan. I think it was the Jawa thing, and it was like 2 paragraphs long, and you're like, I think it's because in the movie intercut.
Sometimes the jump back and forth without having like a line of delineation, I'd be reading and be like, oh, I'm back to Vader. Okay. Like, all right.
The like, it's fun to read the book of a thing you've already seen because you're like, all right, in the book form, you get all the extra information, but pacing in the movie is like, you don't question it the way that it plays off in the movie as much as like, okay, we're here. Yeah. You're like taking stock of where you are.
There is no like wipe to take you there. You're just like, all right. And oh, no, all right. We're not Luke anymore. Actually, it's same chapter.
Sometimes I went back and forth in the Kindle to see if I like
They just give you a line skip in the book. I mean, I don't know how it's formatted in the Kindle, but
because the Kindle,
you get a little
so the Kindle, I learned it's not a full page you see.
Right.
So I also might be missing it because I'm not looking even at the full page. Like it splits it up. So that might be.
And it's probably harder to be like, oh, did I miss a page? Because it is split up. And that you can kind of see a full.
And the pages, they keep the page of the book. So I'm on the same page for 3 Kindle turns.
Wow, interesting.
Which also makes it a little bit hard to check. I basically have to just do that thing where I like read. I'm like, what's the last thing I remember reading exactly? Okay, cool.
Oh, especially if you come back to it after a few days.
Right.
Whoa,
and then with the Alderaan stuff that happens later, I literally was like, did I skip the page where we see it get destroyed, or did it not happen?
It just
in this?
does not happen.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Which is like fine in a book because what the fuck are they going to even say? But anyway, this is when, while he's burying those guys, that's when Luke goes home, sees his family's destroyed. That's when he decides to be a Jedi. They go to Mos Eisley.
Do you think they left out the Alderaan thing as like we're going to get him in the theater?
I think it's very possible that they just like don't.
So they wouldn't spoil that moment?
They basically do everything in the moment that happens. They just don't have the scene.
Yeah,
It's
they
like-
don't go that far.
It's almost like like ... and then they cut instead of showing it all. But they also cut out Obi-Wan's scene.
He doesn't feel it. Yeah.
What my theory is that somebody realized we talk about how this weapon is the craziest weapon
have
of
to
all
show it,
time,
yeah.
but we never show it. So they're probably like, no, we have to do this.
They probably decided not to show it for like tech reasons originally, and then decided to show it.
Let's pop that balloon.
You know the like effects guys or nerds are like, please, like they want to blow stuff up. They're like, yes, we get to blow it up.
If I was in 1977 making this movie, and then I saw the dailies from ILM, I would be like, oh my god, you guys are, whoa, you know, like
we're doing cutting edge stuff here.
Yeah.
Because then they don't have it shoot later on. So I do think they're, but in the book, I guess you get to be surprised with them because they come out of hyperspace and they're
Right.
like, what the fuck? There's just rocks.
Right. So, but you kind of know what's going to happen. So basically,
Sure.
these aren't the droids we're looking for, which is pretty much exactly the same as it was. It's a little bit more like mystical. Like, I really love how they do it in the movie too, where it's just kind of like the Force sounds like a little pop on a microphone, kind of, which is just a really cool idea.
Because he was like, his voice, like,
exactly.
changed a little bit, which
Yeah.
if you have seen or read Dune, you understand what that is fucking stealing.
Oh, weird.
I especially love in the scene in the movie where he's powering down the tractor beam. That's like one of the coolest Force scenes ever.
They some of the lines in this, you get like the first draft of the movie lines, and some of them just read like on paper. Like we have the benefit of having seen the movie, but you're just like, that whole exchange happens beautifully. Like these aren't the droids. Like it's like great to see that it works in print as well as it does.
Yeah, we got the droid racist bartender who makes R2D2 and C-3PO wait outside the cantina. They're looking.
They don't mention him being a Clone War vet. They do in this though. Like just explain. We don't have we don't have oil, because they go through a lot of like talking about the things that droids ingest and need lubrication. So I don't know. Like there's theories, but then here he just says it to them.
Yeah. So
but
Obi-Wan,
also there's also like, because they describe it more, there's an air of like this is a place where you go where no recording, no microphone, and I got the vibe that like
droid.
You look like a cop. Like you bring in a robot and everyone's like, "Whoa, no!"
Well, you got that. You got that like all cameras.
But it
all
also
tape,
it doesn't come off as even though they're racist to a lot of people in the world of Star Wars, it doesn't come off as like, no droids allowed. I don't like here because he's racist. Again, it goes back to like, if you brought a Roomba to a bar, people would be like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
The like,
or your dog.
yeah, it's they're. Yeah, you just think of it as like
They're like, get it.
when like they bring when they're saddling up for the X-Wings and they're like, oh, that R2's like a little dented. We'll just get you a fresh one. And he's like, no, this one's been
my
one.
boy.
I think the guy's even like, okay.
All right,
You're like, all right, weirdo.
They're not like, for us, we're like, it's fucking R2. It's a buddy. You've had a friendship. They're just like, you don't want free iPhone 13. You don't want the free upgrade.
As a person who just got one, I would rather keep my 11.
but-
I want my R2 back.
Okay, but I'm saying,
iPhone
you see what I'm
13
saying?
sucks.
Like, it's just it's like, it's so different, and it's just a different way to look at it that way.
It changes a lot of what because we see R2 and 3PO as sort of the humanized versions of these droids. They have characters and emotions, and we see that from moment one of the movie. So when they're not allowed in, you're like, oh, man, that dude's racist as hell against droids. But really, he's like, it's just a droid, bro. They're fine outside. It doesn't matter.
And they explain with C-3PO that he is like, he's so human because he is intended to be human, and they give him programming to make him think like a human. He literally is like cruising in the land speeder earlier, right? He's like driving, and looks like, you are like good at driving. And he basically is just like, he's like one hand on the wheel, like cranking it. He's like, I've been trained to do this kind of stuff. Like, he is an exception, but I think because we see him as the rule, but they're not.
They're like spies. They're
Most
like
of them are
robot
not they don't act like creatures of sentience. They're not treated like them. C-3PO is
they're hero units.
Plus, they're the crazy thing is they are what I would imagine based on the way they describe the Tantive and stuff. Like, this is Vader knows it's a royal ship because it has a royal seal, which means these are droids of royalty. So not everyone has a droid that's like, oh, hello, I speak a bunch of different languages.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody looks at his his chrome, like shiny armor, and is like, that's like
way out of place.
Yeah, like if you like walked a tuxedo through like fucking
exactly right.
The YMCA,
What are you, a
probably
narc?
like, what is going on?
The minute you showed up like that, people are like, you don't belong here.
Yeah, it just reads as weird.
So while Obi-Wan's talking to Chewbacca about what he's doing. We get the like book version of the like Dr. Evazan scene.
He doesn't like you.
It's not Dr. Evazan. It's not an Aqualish alien.
And it's 3 dudes.
One of the dudes is a full eyeball dude. One of the dudes is a
Sounds like a winter and what do they call them from Bloodborne, like all eyes thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking Eye Boy from X Factor. And,
Okay.
And we got the mouse dude that's in the movie.
Yeah.
And some other asshole. And
the guy looks like a capybara or whatever.
yeah,
Like,
and then one dude, instead of like the scene plays out as it normally does, then one dude punches Luke so hard that he flies across the whole bar, which causes Obi-Wan, who was not even sitting there, to appear there, slice
Shadows,
the mouse
bro.
completely in half, and slice the dude's arm off at the same time.
no, he was there. They were roughing him up, and then he does the same. Like, he comes over and is like, "Let me just buy." He says this young one is not worth your trouble. Let me buy you a drink.
It's just that he
And
was
then they
already
punch
talking.
him.
He was already talking to Chewbacca.
Yeah, he like
steps in from elsewhere in the bar, ends this problem,
But
and
it
then he's
adds
like,
it adds
"Let's
the
all-"
magic to every time he and Darth Vader move. It is like
magic.
they're just there.
That's it. Sorry, you're right. They did have an exchange and he tried to come over, but they make you. I came out of this being like, Obi-Wan. I want to be Obi. I don't want to be Luke. I don't want to be Obi-Wan. Like, it's like crazy how cool he is.
Extremely violent.
The scene plays out weirdly in the movie, as I recall. Like, it's kind of hard to see what happens, but my read
For
is
ratings,
like,
right?
My
They
read
cut
is
it.
this is supposed to be like a samurai.
Fast, you can't
Like,
even tell. What
their
happened.
whole thing. Yeah, he pulls it out, cuts through. They have like a Resident Evil, like
1.5
One
dudes.
guy falls over, the other guy fires the thing, flies off, and then the other guy has his arm fall
Yeah.
off. But it's so much cooler described in the book, and then in the movie, as I recall, it's all just very
It's quick because
rushed.
they don't have no. Like Alec Guinness can't be like a fucking samurai.
right. And I'm also sure, like, they were like, George, you can't actually show in a movie people fall
Right.
too. Like,
do
we'll
it to
give you-
do it to the alien. That's easy to show his arm. It's an alien, so it's not a human.
Yeah.
But what's crazy about this is when you're describing Alex the samurai stuff.
Yeah.
The idea that eventually, by the time it reached the late 90s, all the like samurai stuff had made way for more like anime versions of
Absolutely.
fighting and things, which
Way
it's a
higher.
totally different vibe. And so then it became, all right, well, how do we as a fandom resolve the fact that Obi-Wan was twirling and flipping and then is just like, and now we're just going to face each other, and the first one to get the blow wins, like that kind of thing.
Right.
It's a different vibe.
Yeah, and it's cool because I don't know, like it's much more formidable. Like it seemed like Obi-Wan doesn't seem in the movie. He seems a little impotent. He seems like he's real squeaky.
This is the good. Oh, you're saying because Alec Guinness?
Just because, like, in the there's limits to the special effects on the swords. There's limits to what an old man's body can physically do. There's no CG. So, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, like, the intensity is, like, in your imagination even while you watch the movie, and it just works better. You're supposed to think that way when you're watching Alec Guinness do what he does in the movie, but without the... I don't know if it's a disadvantage of seeing him do it poorly as an old, slow man, but, like... Not having that just makes it seem much more intense in the book.
Well, and when we get to it, they also just describe what happens differently.
Yeah.
So it's also like a different vibe and energy.
Yeah.
But-
So that scene happens. We get the Chewbacca scene. Then we meet Han Solo, who has a girl in his lap. When
Yeah, he
meets him,
does.
which is
Oh,
hilarious.
also just it's cool because I think up to this point and generally like Obi-Wan talks about how good the Warriors are. He's like so patient with everybody. He tries to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but lets them do their own thing. And I think this is the first time that he like stops the room with like, okay, I'm like the most pleasant guy, but I will kill 2.5 people
in one fucking second.
immediately. Like that's the kind of
It's an
way
incredible reveal.
Yeah.
Han Solo gets incensed. It's pretty much the same scene, except he says, "It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 standard time parts."
I have that quote. I laughed out loud.
Imagine trying to argue that is a measurement of distance.
Time parts?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if this is exactly there, but as many of you may know, I do some sketch comedy writing. It's my other thing. And routinely, Shro and I, when we don't know what word we want to use, we'll put a placeholder. and sometimes highlighted. And then this felt like that, like Alan Dean Foster didn't know the word, so he's like 12 standard time parts, thinking I'll come back and fill it in with when I talk to Lucas, and it made it to the print because I was like, in 12 standard time parts. No one says that. No human being is going to be like, oh, when's our dinner reservation? About like 3 standard time part. Like no one. That sucks to say. No one would say that. It feels like rough draft that got put through.
Stand parts. I got
nothing. Much better.
I got nothing. Some guys go up to the bartender and they're like, hey, where's these guys? And he points at a booth and they're gone.
Whoa.
Yeah. Then we get outside the cantina. Kenobi tells Luke they have to sell his speeder to get the money that he needs. It's like Obi-Wan has some money that he's like willing to spend already, but they're going to sell the speeder, which is just like the movie. Then we get the scene that was restored in the New Hope Special Edition.
Yeah,
between
with Jabba
and Han. And if you've seen the scene that
Jabba
before it was edited,
my read of this is Jabba was like a Mr. T type.
Jabba's just like a
he was
hairy
like a pirate.
dude.
Isn't he like
honestly, if you've ever seen the
original
the clip that they used for that special edition when it was just a dude. It's like
it looks
exactly
like,
what they
how
described.
you would imagine.
Yeah, it's like a guy. He's wearing like a wool. He looks like Jeremiah Johnson more than he looks like Mr. T.
Yeah,
he looks like a big shaggy fuck. He looks like Rooster Cogburn. But yeah,
his like obviously he's not a space slug in this.
Oh, actually, that's not the scene that happens right now. First, we get the scene where
Greedo.
It's basically the same scene as in the show, except it's like every time they show this scene in something, it gets more and more brutal until they start to like soften it. But like in this one, it's like this guy comes to sit down with Han and they talk for a little while, and then Han realizes that Greedo's going to shoot him, and he shoots him.
Right.
In the movie,
in the book, because he declares like, do you want me to kill you right here, or can we at least step outside and do this?
Yeah.
And that's when Han's like, I don't think they're gonna want more bodies in here, and then he like does it.
Yeah. In the movie, in the original movie,
he just roasts him.
Before Greedo sits down, Han knows he's gonna shoot Greedo.
Yeah.
And just just blows him away.
This is we get more of a relationship with Greedo in here, and you kind of like understand him better. This is one of those ones where there's plenty of like books are like a little more compelling. This scene is better in the movie for me because you get to like see him do it. That he's like holding his. This is like a thing where Harrison Ford's energy enhances this so much.
Yeah, I always like this scene. I love the little barbs they trade, Greedo and Han. It's very funny with the like. It's very funny.
He does speak. Oh no, actually, they talk about here. They mention electronic translator, so I think this is how. Does that mean that it speaks basic, or does that mean that you hear basic?
I have no idea. I'm not sure.
Great question.
I believe that what is happening is that there is audio of English being played for Han.
Okay,
that's what I think.
Because it's weird the way that they like, Han knows how to understand Chewie and they don't, but then they also talk about universal translators. So I'm like, is it that Han has a universal translator? And the implication is that that's how he's doing it, or does it not really matter?
It doesn't.
I think the goof with Chewie's, it's supposed to be like Chewie's just growling, and like a dog, Han is like, "Okay, buddy, all right, pal, you're the best." Like that kind of thing.
No, they have a language.
Oh no, because
absolutely, he knows how to like fly a ship.
I think this just has to do more with
but it's
lack
that kind of goof.
I think this just has more to do with lack of subtitles in a book.
Okay,
like honestly,
well, they don't subtitle him.
Chewbacca. Chewbacca, like Jesse's saying, like Chewbacca, it's like a bit, like it's like fun that everybody just treats Chewbacca like he's speaking
Chewie will be like, and Han will be like, oh, calm down, big fuzzball. Same thing
with R2. Like, there's no way that Luke has learned to speak that
binary,
or whatever. But
they do. Yeah, a good they do that in a lot of stuff, but I think that Chewie is the gold standard for it feels to me like they clearly wrote dialogue, not just the idea, but a specific line, because every now and then Han will have a reaction where you're like, we understand what they're trying to get across, but I'm like, what did he specifically say? Because your reply is like, I'm like, it's like
I think that's Harrison
think
Ford.
It, and they don't want you to know. But like my favorite fucking part of, not the favorite, but one of my favorite moments of Force Awakens is like they get back in to escape the Death Star 3 and
Star Killer
Han, like Chewie looks over, like growls, picks up his coat and hands it to Han, and Han just like, what? Like, and I imagine it's married couple like,
don't forget
Han,
your jet.
I bought you this for your birthday, and it's just like what the fuck are you thinking about? We're like, but it feels like they really write stuff for Chewbacca.
Yeah, they do. But I think also a lot of it is just, again, Harrison Ford being incredible at acting. He really gets Han Solo. As much as he hates and jokes about hating Han Solo,
Sure.
he fully understands the character like the way that we do.
Han Solo is like the version of Harrison Ford that I think he is. Like, Han Solo is a dick with a heart of gold.
Yeah.
And I think that Harrison Ford is like an asshole.
He's so cagey. No, Harrison Ford is nice, but he's cagey in like the context of any time we've ever seen him, which is when there's bright lights and a camera in his face and 500 people.
He does. I mean, that's not where he started. He doesn't like that life.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's like, I'm fine with the success I have.
Yeah,
and I get it.
I'd be fine with it too.
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
They do a great job with him in the movies, and they do a great job with him in the books of like, he is like a fully fleshed character, but he's like also like a good, he has a heart, but he can still make honest mistakes. Like, he just is like, he and Luke's relationship are like, it's good from the beginning. We even see them, in the movies get better, but like the way that he like is a dick, but will like, hey, like he won't, when Luke fires back at him, he'll be like, all right, sorry.
They get in a little fight even, and
they get in a fight, but he is like, Luke gets to be the like, fuck you. And then Han's like, have you ever like fought with a big brother or something where you're like, I love you. Like, it's heated, but also like I care.
Exactly. So then we get the scene where Han wheedles 3 more weeks out of Jabba, which is funny because I think they probably removed this because we get it. Like, we just saw him kill Greedo, and so we know that it's getting pretty serious.
Yeah.
And they probably brought the scene back just because they could animate Jabba the Hutt from Return of the Jedi in this movie. I think.
It is redundant information, and
just doesn't need to happen, but it's fun.
It doesn't like add anything. Like, it just, I guess, like you get to see more of like, all right, Han is that like guy that everybody knows. He's like the quarterback that is like gets to drink, underage because he's like the town hero.
Yeah, like, he gets to go to the bar. Yeah.
He's like, like Jabba softens up around him, and you can tell because all of his other people are like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's not cool, dude. You let him do anything he fucking wants to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right.
What is great about that scene, this scene, and then the one in the movie unedited, is that it's like, all right, it's kind of redundant. The way they did it, I would any other time be like, including Jabba the Hutt as like the CGI Jabba in that scene, totally pointless, unnecessary, except for the fact that Harrison Ford sells that like Jabba, you're my favorite human or whatever he says. That's a great, even though it's
funnier that he's not a human
anymore. It makes the line even better.
Yeah.
The fact that they CG'd the guy out.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Like that little addition, like that makes Han even a better character.
I do enjoy
He's
the scene.
He's a little sassy.
I do enjoy the acting in the scene.
Yeah.
We get another scene between Vader and his like henchmen where they're like, sir, we're pretty close to catching the droids, but the governor's like starting to complain. He's like, fuck the governor. Send soldiers. We're stopping this shit right now in the spaceport.
Oh, yeah. You mean the governor of Tatooine, which definitely would be one because it's Star Wars and every planet has a governor? Never mentioned in the movies. Not once.
Yeah, well, then, like, I guess it's still part of the Republic or whatever, but it's weird that there are Imperials there. Like, it's...
I mean, there would always be... There's stormtroopers on the planet anyway.
Yep.
In Anchorhead.
But they don't... Because they talk about the politics of this, or they're like... We need to worry about the Empire because at some point they're going to fucking come here and take this place over. And they're like, nobody cares about this place. And it's like, when you're all about control, it doesn't matter the place.
That's what happened
it.
like yesterday in Star Wars when they killed the Senate.
Yeah.
Right? So like it's happening.
And you're seeing it now.
Yeah,
Everyone's like, oh, this fucking sucks. But they're like, we're the Empire. What are you going to do?
Right. Mm-hmm. Then we get the Docking Bay 94 scene where they like shoot their way out of Tatooine, which proceeds pretty much exactly like the movie. They spot 2 or 3 Star Destroyers on the radar.
Which, by the way, Star Destroyers are not described as anything remotely close to
Giant
space
capital ships? Yeah.
space triangles.
Yeah.
It's just like a big floating thing with a bunch of weapons, and you're
Yeah.
like, all right, I'll take
Yeah, they
your word
really
for it.
like the idea of space as a place is not standardized like it is today.
You could. It's really like, I don't know, like, just because I read a lot of Lovecraft recently. Like they describe things vaguely, so when you see fan art, it can be so different.
Yeah.
And stuff like this, the way they describe it, there's an anime, I haven't seen it, but it's like Battleship
Yamato.
yeah.
You also could be like, based on this description, you could give me a wedge with guns, or you could give me a flying, like, what we think of as like a boat with guns. It's just like a flying shape with gun placements.
It's not. I think at one point they describe it like cactus-like protrusions or something like that. And I was like, what the hell does that mean?
I know what they mean, but like,
it's blasters, it's turbo lasers,
It makes
but it's
me
just
think,
weird.
the Mon Cal cruisers, how
Yes.
they're kind of not standard.
They look like organic.
Yeah,
or
that's
like,
kind of the vibe of that I always get from this type of stuff, or like Jodorowsky's Dune kind of vibes.
Oh, you mean Dune?
Dune. What's his name? Frank Herbert's Dune. Super
NFT
light
Dune?
super light jumps are a thing in this version of Star Wars.
Yeah, they call it supra light.
super light instead of hyperspace, or light speed.
This is where they describe I believe that like most ships have two engines. Where,
you need like
the grav.
Yeah, you need the one to get out of the atmosphere, and then another one in space.
Well, they're like the grav engines are for any place that has a gravitational.
There's like,
so it's like when you're in a system
in the spaceport, they have like a launcher for you to get you off the planet.
Well, but they're like there needs to be some sort of enough gravity to push against, and then I think once you're within a system, then you have to go to that like, and then once you're out of that, you can then do the light travel.
Yeah. Did they ever show? Man, all the different changes they made over the years. I know in the remake in the 90s, in the new editions, they showed the Millennium Falcon rising up and then flying off. In the originals, did they ever show it? They show it leaving in the distance, but did they ever show it like take off and go?
Like
because
what's that, VTOL or whatever it's called?
Because that might make sense of a launcher. If you see in the old ones that it just flies away from the city, it can launch away from the city. That's interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Well, the way that this is described, isn't the bottom like a bolt? Like, because at least they describe that you have to push against something. Isn't that why it's like carved into? I thought they described it as like a bowl shape. So you're basically like slingshotting with gravity.
But I mean, the reason it's
out.
carved in is because it's under, like, it's for the heat. But I mean, like I believe that the idea is that all spaceports work with some kind of long sort of like launch pad that you go out of.
Rather than you just like take off from the hangar and move.
But I mean, I like that more from a functional perspective.
It's cooler, yeah.
But it's neat. Then we get the scene straight from the movie where they trick Leia into, well, they think they're tricking Leia into saying that the base is on Dantooine when really it's on Alderaan. And then they're like, all right, let's blow up Alderaan anyway. And Leia's like, the fuck? And then like, that's all you get.
There's a couple interesting things here. One, I guess they sort of like have, when I think of Vader and Tarkin as friendly, it's sort of like, all right, you tried your way, Vader, let's try my way.
Right.
Here it's like a bigger deal. They like do not, Tarkin is like, that is a very barbaric way to just torture it. Like, it's not so whatever. And he's like, see, it's much better to do it my way, so that when it turns out that he was tricked later, like
Right.
he has like a tantrum almost. He like loses his cool.
For sure.
They point out here, because she's like, we don't have any weapons. They point out, actually, Alderaan was the stockpile, the armory for the rebellion. We have always, and I think it's gone on from there, that it's like a weaponless utopia.
Well, they don't
a
have
neutral system
a
of
neutral
artists.
thing.
And
They don't have a military, yeah.
But here they're like, oh, no, this is where all their weapons are.
Well, we don't know if that's true or if that's...
They talk about it, and Vader, when he's personally thinking about the destruction, because they have a line where they almost make it seem like Vader doesn't like that an entire planet, because he's like, they talk about him thinking about like all of the cities, all the people lost, and then he's like, nope, but they were rebels, he reminded himself. Like, there is a moment where like not pure kill is there, and he has to do it. I don't think if that was a lie that they had weapons there, that he would in his private thoughts do it, or the writer just took some editorial liberties and it's irrelevant.
It could be like not even the people of Alderaan know. Like it could be literally like knowing what I know about Star Wars, it could be that Bail Organa, like Loki, has just been storing weapons on a peaceful planet for that exact purpose.
Well, and regardless, even in the newer versions where they play it off to be whatever, they still use like all of the people that are still in the Empire after it are like, that was a planet of traitors. Like it doesn't matter weapons or not. That was seen as the like heart, the beating heart of the rebellion.
Which doesn't make sense.
It's just interesting because it's always like, they have no weapons. And he was like, they had all the fucking weapons.
Yeah. Chapter 8, we're back on the Falcon. This is the remote training scene, which pretty much proceeds exactly like the movie where Han Solo's kind of poo-pooing the Force and Obi-Wan's like, shut the fuck up.
This is another scene, like I like how it was described, but they do it better in the movie. They add an extra step where he like fucks up, blocks, then they put a helmet on him, then he fucks up, and then he succeeds.
I think that's how it happens in the movie.
I thought he fails. They put him a helmet on,
and he gets a pep talk.
He gets
and then
shot
he's like,
once, and then he does it.
Maybe they just maybe they're just speeding it up in the movie a little bit.
It's better in the movie because it's weird to have like a failure. See, you did it. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, you did it again. It's just it's a little less clean.
Basically,
but
it's the same.
But you're right. It's like exactly the same. They just like cut out a paragraph.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it was real, it probably would have been longer and not so good for a screenplay. Then we get they come out of Lightspeed. They realize there's no Alderaan and there's just like asteroids everywhere.
There is a cool. I didn't write down the dialogue is a little expanded between Han and Luke and Obi-Wan during this,
like figuring out that it's not.
Well, because they're like, it's like, I don't fucking believe in this shit. Han's like, look, I've been around the galaxy. I believe that this, like, I've seen stranger things in the Force.
I believe in the Force, bro.
I believe it exists, but I don't want to think that, like, some fucking thing controls me. I control me.
I'm not going to, like, make that my religion.
Yeah,
like,
it's still, like, is the end result the same? I just found it interesting that he was like, no, I believe that exists because weird shit happens. But I'm not going to operate under that. I'm going to, like, make it happen my way.
Right. Yeah. So then they get caught in the tractor beam, yada, yada, yada. They're on the station. Vader is... This is what we were talking about just a second ago. He's lamenting that this massive display of force is barely detectable in the vastness of space. And he hates working with Tarkin and Mahdi, and he's happy that one day he won't need to, which is interesting.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Oh, because they like have an astro chart. They remove it, and he's like almost laughing at like, unless you zoom in, all of this power, no effect. He's like, but my fucking plans. And I'm like, what does that mean?
And I think that's it goes back to the idea of the competition between Tarkin and Vader, and the fact that Tarkin is like, I will blow up planets. I will rule through fear. And Vader's just like, bro, you blew up this planet and it does power is. Like it doesn't do anything. Yeah. This one, people died, sure, but like, you've done nothing to affect the balance of the galaxy at all. This sucks. And I'm like, dude, that is a great way of putting it, but it's only in the book, really.
Well, you get a lot of that in Rogue One in a kind of fun way with Tarkin, which is kind of interesting.
This relationship, I don't know why this just popped into my head, but it's like when you're like, Pokemon trading card game is the greatest game ever, and then some adult is like, he does not even know about Magic the Gathering. Yeah. Like it's like hilarious how like, he thinks this little ball that can destroy a planet is power. Doesn't even affect anything.
Tarkin wants to kill Leia. Vader's like, hold on, let's see where this is going, because we just caught a spaceship that's exactly like the one that just left Tatooine. Well, and Tarkin's like,
because Tarkin, this is when Tarkin like he's been to this point been like the cool guy, and I think he loses it. But he also points out there's nobody we've killed or they've killed themselves. Like there's no other lead to them, and for him, like Tarkin's end game was the Death Star, and Darth Vader's end game is no, the rebellion has to go. So
yeah. Then we get to the part where they're sitting in the docking bay, and it plays out like when I'm playing a stealth game and I like fuck up.
Yeah.
And I have to like kill two guys, and then like another guy comes and I got to go kill that guy too. It plays exactly like that.
That is the best way to describe it. Yeah.
So it's a little longer than the version in the movie, but it's basically the same scene. And he like he like does the whole thing with his high communicator. It's crazy. And they like they get him to open the door, and Chewie's already at the door, so he like kills them. And then they decide to do the Wookiee prisoner trick. They find it's basically the same scene from the movie. They find Leia in the detention cell. They tell him, stay in the fucking office. We're gonna go deal with this. Obi-Wan goes off by himself. He's like, this is something that you guys can't do. There's no way you guys are going to be able to help me with this. I'm just going to go stay here. And then immediately they find Leia, and Luke's like, well, we got to go get Leia. And Han's like...
Oh, yeah, because R2 is just like jacked in.
And it takes like 10 minutes, which is funny. Like they cut to R2, and it's like, he all his tendrils go into the network. And after about 10 minutes, he's able to have absorbed the entire plans of the Death Star. It's like... 10 minutes, dude. Like, what kind of fucking broadband is this? It's like fucking slow as hell.
He's a modern R2, as they have established, so it doesn't get faster.
This is when Han is convinced by the treasure, which is funny that in this, they're like, well, if Alderaan is fucking destroyed, then maybe she has all the money from Alderaan because everybody's dead. And Han's like, huh.
It's like...
I like the cut of your jib.
It plays like ultimately exactly the same, but this is one of those ones where they added a couple lines that I didn't hate. Like, when they're like, she's the princess, and he's like, did you just forget that there's no fucking planet? And he's like, yes, but doesn't that mean that she gets it all?
Yeah.
And then he's like,
oh. Also, the stormtrooper in this scene is not TK421, it's THX1138.
Yes.
Which, as we all know, is the name of George Lucas's short film and full-length feature film starring Robert Duvall that is in all his movies. Then we're in Chapter 9. This is where they get to the detention center and they realize they have no idea what to do. So this stormtrooper's like, what about you guys? Where the fuck are you going? And they're like,
yeah.
And then this is when they're like, okay, fuck it, Chewie, go. And they just like,
rampage.
They just fuck everybody up. And he's like, oh my God. And they're like killing everyone, all the stormtroopers, while they're pretending like it's like all happening in the heat of battle, which is hilarious. And then he blows the door off of Leia's cell.
Yes, it isn't just an open, like...
He's like, Luke started firing, and when he stopped, the door was gone, which is crazy. He's still dressed in full trooper stuff. She thinks he's pretty short. And then we get the conference room scene in Death Star, where Vader realizes that Obi-Wan's here. He says, he is here, a stirring in the Force, of a kind I've felt only in the presence of my old master. It is unmistakable. I must face him alone. He says all that stuff. So that's all, it's a little bit different. He's like, instead of being like, a feeling I haven't felt since, or whatever he says, it's just a little longer. And then we go to AA-23, the detention block, and they're fighting off troopers at a bottleneck. It's like extremely smoky. Luke can't get a hold of 3PO, so it's basically the same thing. This part plays out pretty much exactly like the movie.
Right.
They blow the thing out. They jump in the trash chute. Still the same thing. Chewie doesn't want to go down there because it smells bad. Leia takes over and blows the thing open. She's like, you guys are shitty at rescuing.
Yeah, she's like, they're like, we're going to go out the other way. And she's like, it's a detention. There's not another way.
Yeah. So they jump in, and then a big white tentacle comes out of the water and grabs Luke and takes him out of the water, which is different from the Dianoga that we see in the movie with the eyeball. You see like a full, big, milky white tentacle. You see a tentacle, but it's not
I didn't think it was white. I thought it was like brown.
In this, it's a big white tentacle.
I made a note that I'm like,
in the movie,
this whole scene loses its tension when
you're not looking at the
wall. They're
walls.
describing what is happening in the movie, but I'm like, this is when anytime they have people like talking over each other and you would hear the music get more exciting. It just is like, the Dianoga scene is like, you know what, this is what happened, but it's not as
This whole part is very beat for beat the movie. The stormtroopers come in and C-3PO and R2-D2 pretend to have been like locked in there. They're like, hurry up, they're getting away. They locked us in here. And it like works. And then they finally get a hold of Luke on the...
it seemed like a convenience for me before, because I'm like, why would you trust these people? But again, like, if your iPhone was like Amber Alert, like, you're not going to be like, wait,
I think my iPhone's lying to me. Yeah,
you're just like, okay, and that's why when he's like, he's really stressed out. Do you mind if I take him to the get repaired? And the guy's like, what?
Yeah, just
whatever.
whatever.
Wait, I don't
Fuck up.
fucking care.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's weird, droid.
Really extremely fast thinking on the part of C-3PO. I gotta say, crushing like espionage, like training level.
He's
nails
like a like main point of view character in this, and has and I don't know, grows and changes.
I
I
think
like him.
before they decided to play them for comedy, in the first
They're
movie,
still played for comedy.
But I mean, like
No
in the
more
first
so
movie,
than anyone else.
Oh, you mean
they
Beyond?
aren't just goof like, oh, I found
Like
a
fucking
droid factory.
fucking jet boosters and like
Yeah,
getting his
they're-
head on his
They're
other
like
head.
they're supposed to be like the blue collar guys that are just like trying to get through the fucking day, and they're missing that the giant
yeah.
galaxy defining events are
But
happening.
they're part of the crew.
Later, R2 just sticks himself into a fucking power. They're like, this fucking idiot.
They're in the RPG party though. They got stats. They're helping. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, they're crucial.
Yeah.
They're,
It's
they
just
are literally the high elf and the dwarf.
Yeah, exactly.
It
right.
is every character in this is a D&D trope,
Exactly
through
right.
and through.
They get to, this is like pure before they have to be R2D2 and C3PO. They're just like R2D2 and C3PO just fucking around.
Yeah.
And then you get the first sick, like we talked about this already a little bit, but like these like scenes, these little poetry scenes of Obi-Wan Kenobi just like slinking around in the dark. Really
Dude, he
cool.
is so cool.
Yeah,
in
they
this.
really just make magic, like the Force seem a lot more mysterious in this than
Yes.
it is later. Then the tentacle pops out of the trash compactor again on their way out and goes into the hallway, and then they like shoot the wall, which like
They have like
collapses.
a Minds of Moria moment. Is
Yeah.
that what the vibe was? Like
Yes.
Han like overkilled the Dianoka.
Yeah, exactly right. And then they have another Kenobi where he sneaks past the troopers. Then we get the weird scene where R2 like electrocutes himself because he's dumb. Silly joke scene. Then we get the scene where they run back into each other and Han like does that weird thing.
He like chases after him.
They take so long to explain this like hilarious bit that plays out very obviously in person.
Right.
But it's the same bit. It's just Han gets too hype running down the hallway. He's feeling himself too hard. And I actually prefer that they like made it ridiculous in the special
with
edition.
like that hundreds of guys.
There's like thousands of troopers.
Yeah, it's way better.
It underlines the bit even more, but
Yeah.
I like in the book version that they talk about the fact that Han is even just like smoking his own stuff and like
And he like turns around and is like, nobody came with me.
He's like,
and then like,
realizes-
fuck, and has to
He
run.
realizes-
Chewie's even like, what the fuck? He's like, fuck, no, we gotta go.
him and the troopers are both looking at each other. Like,
Everyone's like, didn't they say like the troopers are even like pissed
more-
off
there's
that they
more
like
of us than
just
him.
like what the
Yeah, let's
why
just
we do
get him.
this?
Yeah.
I will say this bit works. I think a lot better in a movie type
Right.
context. It's funny, I understand it, but when you explain it out, it's like it loses.
If you know what, if there was no movie though, I wouldn't even think about that. That'd be fun.
But I will say that from the moment we hit the Death Star to the end of the book,
fast.
it's very fast, but all that fast-paced stuff, I think, is why the whole picture 1,000 words thing of a movie is so much better, because a lot of what we're talking about, the descriptors and things, they don't have, it's like, we're moving on. We're doing this thing. We're
There's
keep
gonna
going.
be a lot more conversations.
And so the movie does a better job of showing what's happening.
Yeah, they definitely, just because there's a lot of stuff that I like more than I recall in the movie. This, just things I also made note of that I think the movie did better are like all this action stuff, you can digest multiple sounds and visuals
Right.
in a way that looks better than writing it all out.
I think Splinter of the Mind's Eye is going to be a lot more. I'm interested to see how
Thirsting
it's.
to read
I'm
that.
interested to see how it's paced. I'll put it that way. I think it's going to be a lot more people talking and like booky things
Booky
happening.
then.
But yeah, so then we get the scene where they swing across the thing and Leia kisses Luke on the cheek.
She kissed him on the lips in this one.
Yeah, whatever. Same thing.
No, whatever. It's just a kiss.
Same thing. Like we all know what's going to happen. They're
gonna become family.
They swing across, they shoot the thing and close the door behind him. You get it. Chewie singes his hair as he's trying to get through the door, which is funny.
They do a lot of like what sounds like cop busting a kid trying to improv an explanation where they're like, oh, the bridge is out. But it must be because the bridge controls are on the other side. And you're like, we don't,
Yeah.
you don't have to, nobody cares. We don't know how these, just, it's not there. You have to get across.
That seems like a big Lucas thing. Even when you hear that clip of just them talking about the original dialogue for the movie. And Mark Hamill's talking about like, oh yeah, George would want me to say all these lines, and I have to be like, George, nobody talks like that.
Yeah. That's way too much.
A bunch of the lines that are different from the movie are like 3 sentences too long, or some of them are even just like 2 words too long.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to be like, maybe if you had said them this way, we would all quote them like they were whatever, but boy, just the right slight maneuvering, because a lot of them are really similar to the movie lines, but like a little bit of tweaking and it becomes a much smoother line.
Yeah. Then we get the hangar showdown between Vader and Kenobi, which
this is my favorite.
It's a
like,
big
part of the whole book.
It's a big difference. I would say the big difference here, other than the fact that it's like written really cool, is that in the movie it's very clear that Obi-Wan decides that he's going to die.
Right.
Whereas in this, I think he's definitely at peace with the thought of dying based on what he says. He says, like, this is a fight you cannot win, Darth. Your power has matured since I taught you, but I've grown much since our parting. If my blade finds its mark, you will cease to exist. But if you cut me down, I will only become more powerful. Heed my words, right? So that happens.
Right.
But in this, Vader whips Obi-Wan's ass with the lightsaber.
This one, like, there's a lot of context for this that's very different. I know a lot of people like poo-poo that fight scene. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, so it's just not an exciting, I don't think of it as like a highlight of
it's from the 70s,
of the things. Yeah. But this, with the extra context of Obi-Wan, the extra context for the Force, and Vader being like, this scene is so much cooler. And then literally what happens, they talk about like, it's like really a samurai fight. They sit there and are staring at each other for they like take a stance. They sit there for 2 minutes, and then you see like Obi-Wan start to shake and sweat. What I took out of that was they were fighting in the Force. There was like there was another battle. I can't remember what comic it's from, but there's like one where it's like Odin fighting somebody else, and everyone's like, "Why are they just standing there?" And they're like, "No, they're fighting on a plane. We can't observe right now."
Sure,
that's like how I get that because he's like starts to sweat, and then they start doing like. I think they're just like saber. They're not like as pokey. They're like more like
doing like little.
They should be cutting strokes, right? Like
it's kind of like how what I imagined like in The Last Jedi, kind of how like Luke and Kylo Ren kind of like
that fight scene. Yeah,
they kind of like go in and then they like separate and they're both back to this, and then they're like kind of figuring out how it's going to be like one big attack, and then they like figure it out and resolve.
They have like when I think of like. The Musketeers, like Western European, like the way that they do like a lot of like hits, like there's a lot of whatever, and where I think of like a couple strokes, like because katanas or whatever, they're not supposed to like really.
No, you're not supposed to clink them together. Yeah,
they like speak, do a 1 or 2 parry, and then like recuperate, talk, and then do it again, and it's so cool. And I guess because you're not seeing 2 old men, and I'm pretty sure also the lightsabers were famously like it's not all out.
They would break.
No, they didn't have. You couldn't swing it back
parts
then.
of it, like when you look at, I have the original trilogy on tape. Like it looks like that shit is like going out at parts.
Like isn't that why? Like for Empire, they were like, we got to actually do choreography because they figured out how to do.
I genuinely,
effect.
as a kid, remember thinking to myself, "Oh, his lightsaber must be old because."
It's like a little thin line in the original.
There's a part where like Obi-Wan's like, he's like just taking like little swipes like a cat at Vader, and it like literally visually turns off on the screen. I just thought like, oh, he's old, so his lightsaber hasn't been turned on in a while, so it's like going out. I literally
your
thought
brain just like made it make sense. Well, and so, but like maybe because again I've seen the rest of the trilogy, Luke is like the main character. This, he's like not like Obi-Wan to me was more of a main character, and we know a lot more about him and a lot more Vader. So like this being their big thing had a lot more weight to it. Like the Force being more mystical, their conversations back and forth hit so much harder because you have like Vader. He says like multiple times, "I'm the master now." Like almost like he's trying to like at first it sounds like he is insecure. Or like he comes in, expects to win immediately, is a little insecure, and then does it and beats him. But he does the like, Obi-Wan has the cool of like, you haven't learned, you don't.
He's living in his head rent free. Yeah.
We're not even, because he's like, you're like weak and old. He's like, I am on a different level than you, Darth. you don't understand. Like, you missed what the true power of
you
the
don't even
Force
get
is.
it, yeah.
You don't. And then it leads into that bit where, he doesn't just like auto die, but he's like, even if you kill me, I'm gonna win. But it also makes it a lot more intentional to me that he was buying time for Luke.
It's like an actual fight.
Before they just kind of like fought, and it happened to be that they were distracted, and he's like, he did it for us. Here it seems pretty like, doesn't he like take note of it, and he's sort of like, we get to go through his head as it goes.
He's
more.
like, I gotta keep going while these guys are trying to get out of here.
The difference, even though I like the movie end of Obi-Wan a little bit, because he doesn't just lose, and I like the idea where he's like, I'm done. I've done all I need to do.
It's like actual victory.
Oh, because he like holds up his lightsaber.
Yeah, he's like ready to go, and I like that. But I also, in the book, I like how it's essentially, if we're just going to steal things from other books, it's Gandalf and the Balrog, and Gandalf doesn't want to lose, but he does, and he's like, yo, I bought you time, run, why are you watching me? Get the hell out of here. Yeah. And it's the exact same vibe where he's like, I'm an old badass, and then I get to come back and like Gandalf the white form, which is pretty much...
In the same scene, Luke hears him. Like, literally as they're... I think that happened in the movie, too.
They don't even... He's like, run, Luke.
Yeah.
They don't...
Luke, run.
He talks, well, he
Stupid.
talks to him he talks to him, I think, a little bit more in this than in the movie, but I don't think at any point, like in the movie, they made it clear to me that Luke knows that it's Obi-Wan. I'm pretty sure every time Luke doesn't know, he just like hears a voice, like a half remember. He's like...
He doesn't figure it out till towards the end.
Yeah.
Then we have Luke sad, but it's time for the TIE fighters. Like, don't get cocky scene.
Yep.
Plays out pretty much exactly the same way. They decide to head to Yavin. Then we're on the Death Star. Tarkin and Vader
They switch up the, like, they let us go. They push that later. But isn't there like a whole scene where she's like, they let us go. That's the only way we got out.
First, Tarkin and Vader talk about it in the, like right after the TIE fighter scene. He's like, "Why did you let them go with just 2 TIE fighters? Like all these guys." He's like, "Calm down, you son of a bitch. This is all my plan. I put a homing beacon on the fucking Millennium Falcon. Suck my dick." And so that's what happens. And then Leia's like, "Yo, we have the schematics for the Death Star. That's what's inside R2-D2. Oh shit." Then we're on Yavin, which is described really cool. It's literally just the Yavin temple. We all know it's the Masasi temple or whatever. Right. But they just explain it to somebody who's never heard of that concept before in the book. It seems very cool. They're like, and it is a very dope idea to have a base inside of an ancient space temple.
Yeah. They were like this. It belonged to a now extinct race. They never got interstellar, but they were like, they don't even with their current technology understand how I think, isn't that how, like, we don't really know exactly how they made the Egypts or the pyramids in Egypt or whatever?
Similar thing. Similar.
It was just like these crazy temples that we don't understand how it was made.
If only they knew how much the Force is on those fucking temples.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But it's cool, yeah.
Commander Willard is happy to see Leia. Don't remember him. He might be in Rogue One. I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
We get a really cool portrait of Jan Dodonna at the Rebel base. He's really cool in this, General Dodonna.
Yeah.
They decide in this scene that the fact that only 4 TIE fighters were sent to them after them, like, they know that where the base is now, so they decide to do that.
It isn't just like the Death Star shows up and they're like, oh no, they're like, all right, we're screwed.
There's also this scene here where they pick up R2D. Like, the dudes at the Rebel base are so happy that their boy R2 is back that they pick him up all together like Rudy and carry him away.
He does have a Rudy moment.
It's like, it's the first time I'd ever seen anyone treat a droid like that or something.
Yeah, they like held him in reverence.
Yeah. Like literally carried him away like Rudy.
And then 2 minutes later, like, that guy's busted. You want a new one?
Yeah. So then they have the briefing, and it's like pretty much the movie. Han's packing up, and they have their little, like, I thought, like, well, you got paid, so I guess that's it, huh, Han? And Han's like, yeah, I'm leaving. And Luke's like, okay, well, I thought we were friends and that you cared about the fucking galaxy and stuff, but whatever. And then they both, like, it gets pretty heated, but they both give each other, like, the, like, daps at the end. He says, like, may the Force be with you, and Luke kind of just gives him, like, a little, like, pissed off nod and is like, yeah,
it's the cute thing where, like, Big Brother is like, he's pissed. I don't want to leave on bad terms. So he's like, may the Force be with you.
Leia gives Luke another kiss. Then as soon as Han leaves, he meets Biggs again, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And then at this point, this is where it just becomes fan fiction for Alex, where you find out actually they're all in Blue Squadron.
That was yeah. I was like, Luke is Blue 5?
Yeah,
Blue 5.
Blue Leader is like the coolest pilot ever.
Yeah.
He doesn't even have a name. Or like his name's like Greg or something. I forget what it is, but he says it once. I think it's George or something. He says it while they're in the plane.
This whole like ending scene, it's still great and mind blowing in the movies. This was a like change or expanded scene that was a lot of fun for me to read as they want to get more Biggs time. Like
it would have been weird if this happened in the movie for sure without the extra Biggs time at the beginning of the movie.
They just also have a lot more, because the book, a lot more information about space in this. Like they like things you didn't think about. Traveling through a larger object's deflector shield fucks with your thing. Like, we're just watching them fly, and like it makes Porkins' death. A lot of times people just fly. You're like, hey, idiot doesn't know how to fly, but they're like, their systems are jammed. They like, I don't know. It added a lot of depth to the space combat,
right,
in a really like interesting way.
And if you were to say that in a movie, like when they were going over the schematics and like, watch out, the deflector shields will mess with your. If you added that, it would mean nothing to an audience because they don't know what any of that means.
They expanded on the thermal exhaust port.
Yep.
Like they kind of explained it a little more, and they explained like what they were trying to do so that I never thought it was a plot hole, but I think a lot of people think it's like, oh, you had a weakness, and it's like.
They literally had to make a whole movie to explain to an audience that it wasn't a plot hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a plot hole. I think it's just like.
It's just like a thing that people love to like dunk on.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, here we
Well,
are.
and Al Galen Urso did a thing, so there you go.
Yeah.
Like, whatever, yeah. I was going to say, I have some.
They reference to their, I think Darth Vader, somebody references their computer as apostrophe pewter.
Yeah.
I think it was like Vader was like, he locked in the things on his targeting pewter, and I was like, I think of fucking Lego Batman where he's like, pewter.
I get it.
Give me the lobster thermidor.
So do you want to know the deal with Blue Squadron? What happened?
Why they changed
Do you want
it?
to guess?
Was like what? Like red sounded cooler?
Nope. It's dumber than that.
Is it the paint available on set that day?
You're getting closer.
Blue screened?
Blue screen. Boom. That's exactly what it was.
Amazing.
It's just because of the fucking blue screen, so they changed it to red. And basically the Y-Wings were Red Squadron, and they now became Gold Squadron, which is why you have Blue Squadron and Gold Squadron at the Battle of Scarif now on Rogue One.
Right.
And even the character of the Blue Leader character, that like heroic character that's in this book who like lays his life down and dies, is in the Battle of Scarif now, and you get to see what happens to Blue Squadron in the alternate universe. Pretty cool. Maybe you want to. I mean, there's something about Rogue One where they like went back and actually like grabbed footage from.
Yes.
From
yeah.
The actual shooting.
The original actors were the face of some of the guys.
They had like plates from inside the cockpits, which is like really cool.
Which is why they could have the guy who was Gold Squadron leader be like, Gold 1, reporting in. Yeah.
And it's like the same guy from A New Hope, which is super cool. And Blue Leader met Luke's father when he was a boy. He said, I met your father once when I was a boy, just a boy, Luke. He was a great pilot. You do all right out there. If you got half your father's skill, you do a damn sight better than all right, which is cool. Then we have the scene where he tries to take R2-D2 out of his X-Wing, and he says, not on your life. That apostrophe droid and I have been through a lot together.
Is that the first time they used droid in this entire book?
The idea with droid in this is that it's like slang, and that these things are called mechanicals.
Yeah.
Like people, when you refer to like a human or a mechanical, you're talking about that a droid. What we say droid for now was mechanical, and droid is like almost like saying like choom or some shit. Like it's a fucking slang word. So that happens. Then we get chapter 12, which is like the big space opera. I don't know how like beat by beat we need to do this, but like basically you get the larger. There's just a larger scale because there's an extra wing of fighters that's involved. There's the actual red.
It's what the 90s version of the movie they wanted it to be. Because in the earlier one, there were like 6 ships, and then in the 90s, the re-release,
Yeah.
it's like a whole bunch of TIE fighter.
There's
or
like
not,
that
30
one
or
I
60.
think
What is it?
that
How many do they have?
That one scene where the big planet's there and they all
and it has
show
all
up.
the ships. Yeah. The difference between those 2 shots is amazing.
Yeah, and so you get you basically watch as Blue Squadron is like slowly slammed down. In this version, Vader comes out and is like, basically all the guns are shooting at them and they have to get in, and then they don't understand why the guns are off, and it's like,
It is sick. It gave me like, wait, why did it stop firing? Like
Yeah,
I got
can't-
like, oh,
they can't figure out why the gun stopped, and then Vader like murders them all, and then so they're like,
yeah.
shit, and then they have to do it again.
This part to me, because they kept being like, your father was a good pilot. This part to me, I was like, this could be evidence to be like, they were saying that Vader was his dad. Like,
Sure.
the big bad guy and his father, like, what about his father? Everybody tells him he's a good pilot, and then we bring out the villain is the super pilot.
I want to find like the piece, like we've been talking about.
It's also a
doing-
good way to get him out of the exploding ball.
We've been talking about a lot of plans that we have for the show as we go forward, but like one of the big things I'd love to do is like go back and read like fan theories from the 70s.
Do we deadass not even mention Patreon or anything at the top of it?
We'll talk about it. We'll record a thing once we have our ducks in a row.
Yeah.
But like real talk, like it's so crazy. Like the idea of like maybe somebody thought that Vader was Luke's father before Empire Strikes Back. And I would just love to read someone's logic on that and see where I hope that exists. But basically
The question is like,
But
where
then-
would it exist?
Then the
you know what I mean?
detractors
Yeah.
would be like, obviously you remember from the novelization that Obi-Wan is not comfortable or won't settle for a comfortable lie. So he would never lie because the book states it.
right. They also confirm that Porkins' nickname in this is Piggy. They also, which is crazy. They also
Piggy and
they
Wormy.
also
I was
create-
hoping that like we get like when we were reading this, I'm like, all right, let's get some more. It's a book. Let's get some more on Porkins.
Nah.
He shows up. He's dead. That's
it's
what
fine.
that guy
we
is.
don't need anything.
I know.
about
I
him.
was just like, I wonder what more. They gave us like all this weird backstory and everything. I'm like, let's hear about. Oh
No.
I miss
He is named just to die.
Yeah.
I miss Pops. Red 5. The real Red 5. He's like the hot shot. He's actually the best pilot in Red Squadron.
They were like, is he the guy that has survived?
He's like-
more battles than anybody should.
He's like that dude from Squadrons who's like more machine than man because he's been
yeah.
he's been in so many crashes. And I just love that narrative that like the whole Red Squadron gets wiped out and the whole Blue Squadron gets wiped out. So now Luke is the leader. I know that's basically what happens in the movie, but like it just the context of it is a lot more epic because it feels much more like the Battle of the Bastards or something where there's a lot
It's
of
like
moving
one
parts.
dude standing against everyone.
It's so
And it's-
sad when Blue Leader goes down and dies because you care about him instead of it just being Wedge having to like blitz out, which he does in the movie too. But it's just
Yeah.
like, sorry, my shit doesn't work. Bye, Luke.
It's also, it's like, I love it for a couple reasons. One, we get more like Big's time. We get more information on everything. But also like the one thing that it needs, and it does get this, like in the hero's journey, there's got to be a point where like, all right, your mentor type dies and then you do the work. And we have like, if you watch like happens in the Matrix, this fight scene is where Luke comes online as the main character.
Yeah.
They're like, all right, it's still an incom ship, but it handles similarly but different. And he's like kind of fucking up in the beginning, and like they're like, Luke, everyone's like kind of babying him to like get him on board. Then he starts to get it. Then he starts to flex. They're like, no, and he's like, watch this, and like does cool shit. And then you're like, oh, he's like learning to believe in himself. And the way that they do the targeting computer, especially, is like him finally, I feel like, force, like really force.
They really explain it in a way where it's not just like he takes it away and guides it. It's like he doesn't even know he shot the damn. He doesn't even know he pulled
falls
the
into it
trigger.
and comes down. He's like, wait, did I even hit the button?
He doesn't even
And
know.
everyone's like, you get clear, you did it, kid.
Yeah. Also, Han Solo comes in, just like in the movie.
Yeah.
Surprise! He saves. He turns out he's not.
But that whole shout out to Fall into the Force for actually like being the best way to describe it.
I did. Yeah.
We made fun of it, but I also, because they overused it in that book.
That was like he needs to learn how to fix a radio. Darth Vader fell
Falls
into
in
the
the
Force.
Force, yeah. But
remembering
it
his
makes
time
sense.
at Radio Shack as a kid, he
fell
fell
into
into
the
his past. And
He basically
there's just,
worked at one.
Well, there's just a lot. There's basically what the teams that are there to distract, whereas like each team has a guarding team.
There's a lot
and,
going on,
whatever,
yeah.
and then they all fuck up. So they like Luke wasn't supposed to be
No,
part of
he's
the
just
trench
like-
run. everybody else
fire.
died, and then they become the like three because like
It's
Wedge is supposed to
basically
be really young.
Top Gun Maverick, basically.
Fucking Wedge is even. I don't recall him being this in the movie, but he's like Mr. Negative.
He's just
Our introduction to him is not a good one.
He's
He's
a
like,
mixed-
we can't fucking game over, man. We can't do this.
They mixed Wedge. It seems like they mixed him with Blue Leader, and they mixed him with like Pops. Like Wedge seems capable and cool in the movie.
Wedge in the movie, in the first one at least, isn't like he isn't anything. It isn't until the next two movies that we flesh out.
Oh,
Wedge.
he's like more important than the others.
Yeah.
but he's still not like a greenhorn like he is in this book. In the book, they're like he's a teen.
Yeah, I mean, even in the literature after this, he's a Imperial, like the #1 pilot at the Imperial Academy,
Right.
And then he defects.
He's like Biggs, except he's like better than Biggs.
yeah.
And
The
then
unlikely name.
Oh, I also want to talk about the fact that C-3PO is like extremely in love with R2-D2 for this bit at the end where he's like, "Don't, you better come back to me, like R2. Oh my gosh, please." And that's in the movie too, but in this it gets mentioned like 3 or 4 times, which is pretty fun.
It goes on longer. Also, they mention, and I was wondering if I misread this, the R2s come out of their port and go fix the ship.
Yeah.
Which
That's
I guess
what they do in episode 1.
I know. I hate that. Like,
Well,
it's fine. And then
smaller.
in the movie, they probably realize like
He's smaller.
They need like a little vacuum getting on the wing. It's like I don't like that.
He's smaller in the book for sure, and he's supposed to have legs. Like I'm pretty sure in this he walks on like uneven rocks.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure he's like the size of my dog. You know what I mean? Like I think he's like iPad size. I think he's a lot smaller. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I get. The
I also
sense that
wonder
he's a lot
if
smaller.
like Alan Dean Foster only saw the picture of him
Yeah.
and didn't see that because
The scale.
He walks on 2 and goes on. He probably was just like, oh yeah, he just waddles.
It looks like it. The way he describes it, it seems like R2-D2 has spider legs, but I don't know. Then they get back to Yavin Base. I'm just saying.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know for sure. I can't say.
This has the movie, or just movies of the time ending where like the
wrap
wrap
it up.
up, it's over. It's like
Same thing with the real movie.
I know, but in like one page, if you're like, oh, I wonder how they're going to expand this. They don't. It happens precisely as it's.
Except for Chewie.
That is hilarious too, because they were like, and he gets a medal, and
Leia like stretches to put it on. Like Leia's like, I got you, dog.
they like highlight the fact that he gets a medal in this, and then he doesn't get one in the movie.
You know what? You're right. But other than that, like it
It's the exact
happens
same thing.
in as you read it quicker than it happens on screen.
Also, I think part of the reason why they made 3PO so fussy was so that they could be like, and guess what? He didn't. It's like the Tiny Tim thing where it's like, and Tiny Tim, who did not die, like it feels like
R2 is there.
Yeah, he like shows up at the end, and then the last thing
They
that happens.
also have a weird line. Do you remember
the
when he's
Obi-Wan
like,
line?
No. I was thinking of the C-3PO line where he talks to the mechanic like you have to like bring him back, and they mentioned there's a special bond between a droid and a mechanic, and I was like, why did you write that? What is that?
Just so you know.
I gotta
It's like,
find.
I'll do
the
everything
quote.
I can. There's the blowing like that. There's nothing. Don't do that. Because now I'm just thinking about like, do you fucking know?
He's fucking R2.
I gotta.
Where do you think he learned to stick his thing in all the sockets?
I gotta read.
I learned
this.
it from you.
This line I gotta read. It is so weird. Right near the end of the book, I'm gonna read it just out without context. He gave the tired fighter a look of approval, then found his gaze traveling upward, up to the ceiling high overhead. For a second, he thought he heard something faintly like a gratified sigh, a relaxing of muscles a crazy old man had once performed in moments of pleasure. Of course, it was probably the intruding hot wind of a steaming jungle world. But Luke smiled anyway at what he thought he saw up there, which I imagine is just Obi-Wan like, oh yeah.
I absolutely hate that description.
That's the power of the Force.
That's what I like. So I don't know. That is like Star Wars, an adventure. What is it? The Adventures of Luke Skywalker. What is it called?
Yeah.
Star Wars from the Adventures of Luke Skywalker is what it's called. The book.
Absolutely love this book. It was so interesting. And look, I highly recommend. I think like when I was younger, I would be like, what's what's like, it can only be one best. And I'm like, you know what? The movie and the book do different things.
Yeah.
And that's actually okay. I don't know. Like, maybe that sounds crazy coming from how I've had pretty hot stances on this podcast in the past, but like, I can live with both things being true.
Wow.
And
Untethered. Float free, my friend.
it's so cool. They made the Force cool again in a way that's like, you're losing super speed is not cool. Like, being able to like manipulate the natural world in a mystical way is cool, and you can still do some superhuman things at the same time. It's super sick. I am so hype. I highly recommend. I have found approaching things like an archaeologist can make you like, if you want to go in there and you want to like any of the weirdness, it turns into like
it's
interesting.
just a wonderful thought process to go down when it comes to Star Wars in general. Like, Star Wars is such a big deal, but it came from one guy. And even in this book, like, there's an intro which I believe was written right before George Lucas thought he was going to start writing the sequel trilogy, based on what he says in the intro to this book. I don't know if you read that.
Yeah.
He's like saying like, as this book is being re-released on the eve of me writing even more of my movies, I'm excited.
Because it was like 2010 or 11. When did this get re-released?
It was like, it was around that time. And so I don't know what happened there, but I think that George Lucas was very happy with the fact that he had his idea in the Star Wars universe and other people had their own complete ideas and were running with them. And I think that's the missing piece that we don't really have right now. I think we're going to get back there. I think Disney's going to realize eventually that people just want D&D. Like, they want like a setting where things can happen.
But it doesn't have to be like, and now 18 movies about John Landwalker.
Yeah, just think about the depth of like just a place in D&D and how many different. If you play D&D a lot, think of all the different contexts you've been to the same place, or like, it doesn't even feel like the same Baldur's Gate when you go there in one campaign versus another. You know what I mean? Like, it's silly. You know what I mean? It's silly to imagine that there's going to be some sort of continuity of that level between all these
and if there's like a big threat, or a great example would be if they made a Star Wars movie where it didn't have anything to do with Skywalkers or anything, but it was like, oh, this shard of the Death Star is needed for some, like, oh, okay, that one item is the only connection we have, and like an old man had it,
right?
And he's like, oh, there's Sith energy on this thing, like that. Okay, great, done.
Yeah,
fantastic.
if you've never been to the old Legends universe before,
that's
welcome to it.
Yeah.
Get ready for like Star Wars completely unchained, which I couldn't be more excited for. Couple bits of business before we go.
Oh, I had some other thoughts.
Okay,
too, just randomly.
Yeah, sure.
I took a lot of notes and then didn't organize them like I wanted to. So, but some of the cool stuff. There's some interesting stuff. When they were talking about Dantooine in the movie, they're like, Dantooine is too far away for a practical thing. In this, it's recontextualized as nobody will care. It's too far away from the center for anyone to give a shit if we destroy
blow it up, yeah.
Which made it like even more like gross to me that they're like, we could destroy that planet and nobody gives a shit. But Alderaan, that's like blowing up LA. Like, they're like, that will make people care. And I was like, oh, you guys are fucking.
And then the best part about that is, like you mentioned earlier, is Vader then being like, you blew up LA, but the galaxy is so much bigger than LA.
Right.
Like, what you did was insignificant
And they're
to
like,
the Force.
they're like cheersing each other.
Yeah.
Like, over how this monumental thing, and he's like, you don't fucking know how little you know.
It makes Vader cooler. It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
He comes off as so sick.
As
Obi-Wan
equally
is
magical and mysterious as Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Vader.
They just like, and because like we see Obi-Wan do more different things with the Force, but that he was like, oh, the fucking plans that I have for this galaxy. I'm like, what are they? God, I don't want
Maybe
the answer.
a splinter and a mind's eye.
No, but like we learn a lot, like, and like, you know how before I wanted to know a lot more about the Emperor, and I still think it's kind of cool to know things. Sometimes the mystery makes it better. It's probably better, but the implication gets you so hype. You're just like, fuck, what do you know? What are you trying to do?
Well, it's that kind of thing where the seed is planted for a future thing that like, oh, I'm excited for that. Rather than a lot of the problem with Star Wars is like, we said a thing, now we're going to go back and fill in the blanks of the thing we said, which I think for most storytelling is unneeded. Han Solo, for example, being a roguish guy with a mysterious backstory, period. I don't need any more. Let's see what he does from then on, rather than like, let's go back and find out why he's called Han Solo. It's unnecessary for that. Just like how going back and learning more about Darth Vader, badass evil Darth Vader is great. Him being the dude's dad, great. But like all of those things, I want to see the compounding stuff, not the like, and now 3 movies where we learn a thing you already knew.
Well, they have to do that thing where like, you know, the end point and the beginning point, and so it has to follow that exact thing. So instead of Vader, because even like Empire, where we find out he's his father, he's still like the man doing what he wants to do.
And then he's lying in that movie. He could just be lying to
yeah, sure. But like the point is, he hasn't yet saw Gerrard, where like now in the comics and other stuff, it's like, okay, well, we have to like get him to where he would want to have a son, and we have to get him to be at odds with the Emperor. And so a lot of times he seems like a guy without a purpose, and they just have him kill everybody because that's cool. But here again, him being a guy that has a plan that you don't know and is executing both metaphorically and literally, you're just like, this guy is fucking Beyonce single ladying across, and death is coming. You're like, get it, Van. Get it, Darth. Get it, boy.
Yeah, you're right.
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
And I know where it's going to eventually go, but because we're still in the first step, do we really know?
The lack of details and the lack of like editorial is like so like Vader shows up at as the villain of so much shit. Like we're about to go. I mean, I don't know what you guys are out there are imagining when we say we're going to read every single thing that came out about Star Wars in order.
In order.
We're going to read comic books. We're going to read novelizations. We're going to read novellas. We're going to watch the holiday special. We're going to...
And that's not even that far away.
Yeah, like it's all going to happen. So, you know, I'm not going to tell you our exact methodology for deciding whether or not something is going to be on our list. Because
well, we should... We're going to tell them the next thing we do so they have
I'm going
time
to tell you
like...
the next 5 things that we're going to do. But I don't want people to then come tell me what I should do. I'm going to just tell you what's going to happen and you guys can get hyped for it. Here's what it is.
It's going to be tight.
Next 5 episodes. Ready? Star Wars A New Hope, episode 4, the movie. That's the next episode.
Great.
Perfect next episode after this. Lots to talk about. Next, the book sequel to Star Wars from The Adventures of Luke Skywalker, Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster.
Never read it.
Which came out March 1st, 1978. Right?
It's one of the few books I've never read.
The movie came out May 25th, 1977.
The picture of it, just, I'm like... It conjures so many, and that it's him.
Yeah,
and that this is supposed to be like if there was no more Star. Like
imagine how hype
this
you would
is
be.
a 2-part evolutionary dead end. But I'm like, please,
yeah. That's number 2. Number 3, this came out in March 78. In November of 1978. November 17th, 1978, the Star Wars Holiday Special.
I can't believe that's number 4.
Yeah. This is going to be so much fun.
So the next after that, we're going to be reading the Star Wars Original Marvel Epic Collection number 1, which contains like very early Star Wars comics. And that's number 4. And then the 5th thing that we're going to be reading in order is a novella called Han Solo at Star's End. So the latest comic in the comics...
I did not know about...
Yeah, the latest comic in the comic collection came out April 18th, 1979. So not even 2 years have passed after Star Wars. Then Han Solo at Star's End comes out December 4th, 1979. So we're still not even in the 80s.
Empire was 81?
Empire was 1980.
80.
Yeah.
And then Return of the Jedi was 83.
Yes. So there's a lot to read and a lot to do here before we get to Empire Strikes Back. So
that's crazy.
I basically wanted to show you we're nowhere near. I mean, we are very near Empire Strikes Back in the long run, but like there's a lot here. So please go check out the Patreon. Go check out Star Wars books. A lot of these were re-released as Legends. The comics are all available now, being re-released, even though most of them are Dark Horse comics through Marvel. They're called Epic Collections. That's how we're getting them. Yeah.
I think we could, like, we didn't have a Patreon the first time around, and I think we're gonna do one now, and we have a goal.
It's not
I'm
about
so excited. Like
Yeah.
this has been so much fun already, and like the weirdness. We're gonna do the Lando, the names of those things. Like they just, it's so interesting to like see how we got to where we got, and like what was possible back then before like things got like locked in so hard and like wild.
Yeah, so get ready. I mean, like, this is already getting so, like, once we get to the comics, we're gonna go so deep into like Crazy Town. Just get ready, and like I like the things that I've purchased lately to read. The Star Wars.
Every time I come to your house, there's like 6 new like beautiful treasures of the past of Star Wars.
The fucking hardcover Star Wars droids and Ewoks hardcover
God.
omnibus.
Here's the thing, like the art's actually pretty tight.
Yeah,
like,
it's
it looks way ahead of like it looks modern.
I have not read or seen the large proportion of what we're going to be reading on the show, but like nothing is safe. Like we're gonna do young adult, but anything that's not like for educational purposes, we're pretty much gonna do. So
we're like Anakin to those younglings. Nothing is gonna be safe from us.
I will say that if you are interested, if you've been listening through the New Canon Book Club and you are interested in the audio versions, because I know for a lot of those books we did the audio, for a lot of these early Star Wars books and Star Wars related things, audio versions do exist, but they are like the 2-hour version.
Abridged.
Yeah, they're very abridged. And so, yes, you can listen to Anthony Daniels read a ton of books to you, but it will be very short and not nearly everything that we're going to cover.
And we're also going to upload the outlines that I'm using to talk us through these stories for people on Patreon.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, and we're doing a little bit more, like actually outlining it. So at least if you don't have time, we will go through the entire
can follow
story.
along.
Like,
Yeah, you can follow along. I'm not here to tell
in the
you.
past, I feel like we'd like, whoa, what happened? We like.
I'm not. Yeah,
stumbled through
I'm
it, but
not
here
here
it's
to.
gonna be a
I'm
little
not
more.
here to like tell you the entire story of the Star Wars universe on this show. But like, yeah, you'll be prepped and you'll have a reading guide. So be ready.
Well, that is it for the very first one back. Super excited about this, and we will see you next time.
In another galaxy, another time.
Another time.
Bye bye.
The Star Wars Old Canon Book Club is made possible by contributions from our listeners at patreon.com/SWOCBC. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with a discussion about our next selection, Star Wars, a film by George Lucas first released on May 25th, 1977. This episode was edited by Alex Del Campo and Alex Fossiani. The theme song is Venus, the Bringer of Peace by Gustav Holst, performed by the U.S. Air Force Heritage of America Band. Original show art by Jackie Whistler. See you next time.